There's no time.
Lost.
The time is
13
o'clock.
Hey everybody, what's going on?
Yep.
It's Wednesday. Here we are once again doing the shit.
You sleeping? You sound like you're sleeping, Jenny.
No, I said, well,
Okay.
hey,
All right.
I've had a long day.
Yeah.
And I had a long day yesterday. See, I
Yeah.
actually have a long day every day.
All right.
I'm always like working.
Today's show are the unexplained mysteries of John Wilkes Booth. Did the mysteries, the unknown mysteries. Shit's mysterious.
It's really not mysterious.
It's mysterious.
It's like, shut up, it is too.
Shut up. It's mysterious. I'm watching Pookie. Pookie's down there throwing your own toys, huh, Pookie? That's right. Catch them. She's throwing them ice.
Well, Tom was trying to throw the toys
She
for her,
wouldn't
but
throw
she
with me.
was like, no.
She's like, nope, not throwing.
In this room, she wants to throw her own toys.
That's right. In the living room, she wants me to throw them. And in here, she throws them herself. She's throwing it down. Look, she's got the fucking mouse. She's funny. She's funny, yeah. Every
She
little
goes like
place,
that.
every little place in the house has its own purpose and activity. She'll only do certain things in certain part of the house.
Yeah.
It's weird.
She's well.
Everything is a Pookie station.
She's set in her ways.
Yeah, yeah.
She has Pookie stations all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I feel like we haven't done like maybe a American history one in a while.
Mm-hmm.
I actually did get the idea to do a show about John Wilkes Booth from, like, I think it was what was it at the Shat Show? The Shat Show. That's what I
Yeah,
call it.
It's a Shad show.
It's I know, that's why I call it that.
Yeah.
It's a Shat Show. I'm sure somebody had to on the crew of that
Yeah.
show had to make the joke.
He doesn't
Well,
like to be called that every day.
I know, but
Can I call
come
you the
on.
Shad? He's like, no.
No. What are you gonna do about it, old man?
Yeah.
Well, no, I'm just saying. It's like, but I mean, for the purposes of that joke, you would think that he would make an exception. But I'm just saying that I just call it the Shat Show, but because it's just called the Unexplained, which is it's too generic.
He's awesome in it.
He is awesome.
He hams it up through the whole fucking thing.
I know,
And he
right?
doesn't break character. We don't know what happens. What can save us from the devil? 'Cause he did
That's
one on
what
the
we're
devil.
going to
and
find
if
out.
the devil exists, how can we protect ourselves from him?
Yeah, it's very much like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah,
And I'm
yeah,
just
yeah.
like, that's right, lead into
That's
it,
right,
Chat.
Shad.
Lead into
Let's
it.
find out. Let's find out, Shad. Then they go to some.
It's a good show, though.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, but some of the stuff, I think it's funny, like how they do like all the devil shit, and then they have
Yeah.
to like keep a straight face, like
Yeah,
that shit's
yeah,
real.
yeah.
But but I think it was either on that show or some other kind of like History Channel show that I saw, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right. There was like a weird theory going around like back in the day that John Wilkes Booth didn't actually get killed when they say he got killed, and that it was like a look-alike, and that he actually lived into his old age. Because it wasn't there something like some guy like on his deathbed and he was like, oh, I'm really John Wilkes Booth, and all this
Yeah.
other kind of stuff.
Yeah, some people thought that the guy that they did kill wasn't John Wilkes Booth. It was another guy.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of stuff that Booth actually got away.
Some people think he went to Japan.
Yeah.
There was that story.
The assassination was actually an advanced Confederate special operation. It was like a vengeance mission. The question is how organized was it? And did the Confederate government have a hand, or did the ex-Confederate government have a hand in it?
I mean, I kind of feel like, at least from what I read, they're like, well, it's possible.
Unlikely, though.
But probably not.
But we're gonna get into that.
Yeah.
That's what the show's about.
Like, not impossible, but not likely. Not likely. Because, well, that's why I kind of felt like, so when I was like, oh, maybe we could do a show about that, but then like when I started researching just the guy, I'm like, well, actually just his story on its own is like actually interesting enough.
There's a lot
I
of
thought.
shit I want to say about it right now, but I'm gonna have to hold it back
Yeah.
to save it for
'Cause
the
you're
right
getting-
moments on this fucking.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, this should be good.
If you're new to the show, Jenny and I are both Southerners. I've traveled everywhere though, but my family's fucking from Mississippi, fucking Heidelberg, Mississippi, right above Laurel, about 90 something miles, maybe 70 miles from fucking Tupelo. It's fucking deep south. All right. I know the culture very, very well, and so does she. She's more like northern part of Florida, kind of. Yeah, she's from Daytona or Deltona.
Daytona.
But the culture is very similar to what you'd find in the Panhandle or any other places in the South. Florida is the South, but it's kind of like tropical too. It's also partially like the Caribbean mixed in with it too. But so was Louisiana. It's got a lot of Haiti and France mixed in with it, and Spain. You know, this was all Spanish territory at one point, and French territory in other places, and then British, and then it became part of the Union, and then the Union broke up, and it became, you know, the Confederation, and that was around for only a few years, and it got fucking crushed out. And then long campaigns of basically kind of like ethnic cleansing to a certain extent. It's just not quite directly. There were concentration camps here. A lot of guys died in them. They tried to kind of fucking cover that up, and Reconstruction didn't go well, and the South descended into basically a race war that went on for a long time. And racial segregation was kind of like South Africa in certain places, you know, and just the South has a troubled history, but it's very colorful and far more.
That's one way of putting it.
Yeah, it's very colorful. Mississippi is like the North Korea of America, building monuments to long gone heroes or heroes that never existed, and everything was just a big middle finger to the North. It was mostly just a fucking. It was a fight between white people that went all the way back into the honky motherland, because the ethnic makeup of the white people in the North and the South was different, even way back in the 17 and 1800s and the 1900s. It just, and we'll get into it as it goes on. But you know, there's a lot of good programs on it if you're more interested in it. It was a lot more than just politics or slavery. It predated all that. It was a fight over money, and how English you were or weren't had a lot to do with it. You know what I mean? How Irish you were or weren't, or how German you were or weren't. You know, it was a factor. And the Northerners were more Scandinavian and British kind of than we were, and the South was more Irish, Scottish, German, and French with Spanish. So, and the United States was always just a damn patchwork quilt of a bunch of damn warring ethnic groups. The Union was designed to keep them from directly fighting, and they'd had a central representation in Washington, D.C., and everybody always tried to game the system to send the money in their direction. And it's just been a long, that's part of what happened during all that. And new people kept coming in, which kind of diluted it, and things were forgotten. But the South, certain parts of the South never forgot any of this shit. My grandparents hated Northerners, hated them, as if they were from another country, and that they didn't deserve to exist. That's what it was like, man. Now,
My grandfather was like that.
yeah,
Too. My paternal grandfather.
yeah.
My mom's side of the family are actually from Maryland. Where John Wilkes Booth is from Maryland.
In those days, if you were a Northerner and you were in Mississippi, you were putting your life at risk. If you were a federal agent in Mississippi, you were putting your life at risk. You know, the cops here would get you. You know, they were fucking. It was wild, man.
Ben Frail says the Knights of the Golden Circle wanted to establish a slave empire centered around Cuba. Yeah, and there actually were rumors, I don't know if they're true or not, that John Wilkes Booth was a member of that. I'm not entirely sure if that's ever been established, but that is one rumor that comes up every now and then.
Yeah.
Because he was a big fan of slavery. Big fan.
Yeah.
Big fan.
Yeah. Now, Hollywood and modern culture will kind of lead you to believe that slavery was popular in the South and that everybody agreed on it. Mississippi had most of the slaves per capita. It had Most of it was right there in Mississippi. But even there, slavery was banned in half the counties. So you had free counties and slave counties, and they were constantly fighting with each other. And it's because slavery is not a good economic model. It sucks all the money out of a fucking economy. It just impoverishes everybody. And then it enslaves innocent people. So, you know, even in Mississippi, they were trying to stamp it out. It wasn't going to go anywhere, though, because fighting plantations owners was kind of like fighting drug cartels or mobsters. They were very powerful, very ruthless, and they would kill you, literally, if you can't win up against them. And if you were a poor white person trying to become a farmer and make anything for yourselves, you'd never be able to sell that stuff at prices. You could never compete against stuff that was coming out of plantations. So all the money was just sucked away. So, you know, it wasn't popular like people think. And really, during the Civil War, they kind of had to see it. There's a real good movie called The Free State of Jones. My family's from Jones County. And the Jones County fought against the Union and the Confederacy eventually. It was like a rebellion that had whites and blacks fighting against the Confederacy. Because you just... why would poor white people who could barely make it at a farm, why were they being forced to defend a bunch of plantations? That's really what it was about. The plantation owners had to basically trick them to do it and turn it into a thing of honor. Like, they've invaded your country. We have to get them out of here. And well, what would they have to look forward to? Just being poor again in that damn shotgun shack, fucking growing crops that really you couldn't sell in the market. You only had to eat them, because if you sold them in the market, really you wouldn't get anything for them, because that's what everybody else did. You know, you'd have to match the prices of what the plantations were selling, and you couldn't match those prices.
Well, obviously, because they weren't paying their workforce.
No, a plantation was like, you know, their fucking operating costs were low, and the thing is that, you know, we're talk about food and cotton. Cotton probably was like one of the biggest exports into the other states. Probably where most of the money came from. But that's really only the tip of the iceberg. Those plantations also made furniture, clothes, clocks, real high value items, and you just couldn't compete with the fucking prices, you know. And when you think of a slave worker, you think of a person picking cotton. No, they had some of them fucking highly skilled craftsmen that could make a clock. A fucking that's a high tech. That'd be like you making a damn laptop computer. Right. In those days, they could make guns in plantations. You know, they did all kinds of stuff. It's just that it wasn't. It was kind of like a cottage industry. There wasn't any mass production in terms of like you know, they didn't have big factories. It wasn't what the Industrial Revolution hadn't really taken root in the South at this time. So they could make things, but they couldn't mass produce them. So when the South kind of got in a situation where it had to equip its own troops and they lost the support of France, there's no way to get together and say make a standardized rifle or a standardized cannon. It required too much organization and supply lines that the South didn't have, and they just weren't going to be able to produce their way out of that war. And the limitations of Southern culture, they were not going to be able to fight a kind of war that they would win, because the Southern society and its culture was real similar to, say, medieval Japan or feudal Japan. It was like that. A daimyo was kind of like a plantation owner. It was an agrarian society. It wasn't industrialized. It was very individualistic. It was kind of class-based, you know what I mean? The samurai was kind of like the plantation class, where the samurai had the power of life and death over Japanese merchants and worker classes. They were kind of like the law enforcement officials. They could really, and when you think of a samurai, you think of doing it on a battlefield, but most of the samurai were just the guys that wrote books and shit and carried a damn sword. But if he thought you committed a crime or did something, broke a rule, he'd kill you. It was his authority to do so. The South was kind of like that. It was more honor-based than legal-based. So when the war broke out, they had to fight what they would consider to be an honorable war, and then they were saying this. So it had to be a conventional war, which is a European-style war of fucking lining up in big fucking skirmish lines and shooting at each other with cannon and shit. It's suicide, really. The South could have never won a war like that against the North. It would have had to have been a guerrilla war, which some of that did happen, but not enough. It should have been primarily a guerrilla war if the South wanted to win. They should have just let the invading army ride in with no resistance. And then once they were in, terror campaigns, and you'd eventually drive them out. Same thing Afghanistan and Iraq did to us. That's how we should have won it. But the South didn't think that way. It tried to put its best foot forward and was trying to say, no, we're civilized just like the North, so we're not going to play that game. Now, Jones County did. Just watch the movie. It's called The Free State of Jones. It was a terror campaign.
Can you hand me that little paper thing over there? That little thing? Yeah. Because Ben Frail said this was actually a great idea. Yeah. He said, you should do a true crime video on the Sallie Mae Mueller slavery case, which was in the book The Lost German Slave Girl, if you read it. I have read it. I read it a couple of years ago, and it's really, really good. And I agree that would be, and I would never have thought to do a show about that, but I'm going to write that down because, yeah, that was an excellent book, and it was really, really interesting. So thank you for that. I will put that in the next Patreon poll, and we'll see how that goes.
So the South basically kind of got, each southern state fought the Union for different reasons. It started off as a peaceful divorce between the states. The North did sign a peace treaty with the Confederacy that was kind of like a non-aggression pact. But in one of the places, a military post was inside Southern territory, and they captured it, and then the South went in there and invaded to take it back, and the fighting started, and then the war got declared. So the peace treaty didn't last long. The South interpreted that as the North breaking the peace treaty, and therefore they have broke the peace treaty. The dastardly scoundrels, blah blah blah. They've invaded the country, and they whipped up the Southern population to fight an invading force that they didn't get along with for years before this. Each state fought the Union for its own reasons, and some of the fucking shit went back decades. And the first one to actually leave, and I think the first one to actually secede, I believe, was Florida. And Florida was just a mixed state. It was more like something from the Caribbean than it was, and it was heavily Hispanic. It was more like something from the Spanish Empire more than it was from the United States. It was just chaos, really. The South was chaos. The Civil War was chaos. More than anything else.
Big time. Well, and like I was going to say, when you talk about each of the states like having their own thing, like things are a lot more complex.
Yeah.
John Wilkes Booth in particular was from Maryland, which was a slaveholding state, but they chose to stay with the Union and did not join the Confederacy.
Yeah. That's another thing that people...
So it's called a border state. They did have those as well.
Yeah. That's another thing. The war didn't really have anything to do with slavery. It wasn't until after the fucking war had started, the North brought the slavery issue to the front, saying we're gonna finally free those slaves and stop slavery. It's true that the North had wanted to end it. They had been telling the South, look, man, that's unconstitutional. You can't do it. And a lot of the people in the southern states agreed. They're like, yeah, you can't do that. And like I said, the worst one for slavery was Mississippi. And half of those counties had banned slavery. But you couldn't stamp it out. It was like stamping out drug cartels. They were crafty. They had a lot of money, and they knew how to skirt things, and they could take control of a county. And in those days, a county was like a state inside of a state. the counties were kind of sovereign in some of these states. A county could be in a state and tell the state government, fuck off. Because they democratically decide to do something in there, and that's it. It's just the way it was back then. And the federal government, for the most part, had no teeth. It could talk all it wanted, but it really couldn't make much happen. There was just no way to enforce anything, really.
Murder Hornet said, just doing a little smack, LOL.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, I mean, you do you.
So this is the background where this dude came from. And that was nothing that some of the Union and some of the northern states, or some of the Union states, had slaves, but they were in the war or stayed out of it. Maryland stayed out, or they stayed out of it, didn't they?
They basically stayed out of it, although they were just kind of like, well, like the people here, like it's technically legal to hold slaves there, but it's like they didn't really want to go with the Confederacy, but they were basically saying, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll get into that in a little bit. But
and some states only declared war against other states. That's another weird thing that happened. Like some southern states says, yeah, we're going to go to war, but we're not going to go to war with all the Union. We're just going to go to war with that particular northern state that we have a problem with.
We just don't like
We
those
don't like
guys.
that one. Right. And
we don't like New Jersey.
Right. Well, it was usually something
in particular.
It was usually a state they bordered that they had some kind of a trade dispute with, or a history of problems with that other state. So this is where we're going to go to war, but we're only going to go to war with that state. Although that didn't actually happen on the battlefield. In practicality, everybody had to fight everybody. That's what really happened.
Danny Rowling said, was there a possible chance that John Wilkes Booth could have got away if he had planned better or had help? He did have help. He had several co-conspirators, and he had a bunch of people like that were Confederate sympathizers that helped him along the way, and yet he did get away for a little while, but they eventually caught up with him. And I think the weird thing about this, and I saw this pointed out like on a documentary that I watched about him, that they're like, one of the interesting things about John Wilkes Booth as an assassin was that a lot of assassins that you see, it's like, oh, I'm going to kill the president or whatever. It's like they usually do it to be famous. John Wilkes Booth was already famous. He was so famous that everybody knew what the motherfucker looked like, so they knew who they were looking for. Like, he was famous all over the country. He was an actor. So he did it for political reasons. I mean, and he was very, very clear about that. Like, they still have all his letters and stuff like that, because he had like a bunch of siblings, and he wrote to them and argued with them about politics because they didn't agree with him and all this other kind of stuff. So I don't know. So like I said, it's really interesting that he didn't really do it for fame. He really did believe in his cause, I guess. Yeah. Which I don't know. I guess you do see that sometimes with assassins, but I kind of feel like the real high, the real famous assassins, they usually just do it for fame. I feel like to get famous.
This was politics.
And this was definitely politics, because like I said, he didn't need fame and he didn't need money because he had both of them.
He thought Lincoln was a tyrant.
Yeah,
a tyrant had to die for the crimes he committed against people. That's basically, they absolutely believe that.
And he also thought that in the South, after he did it, that he was going to be hailed as a hero.
Yeah. I don't think it
Spoiler
really happened
alert,
that way.
that it did not happen. Nope.
They were talking about the cottage industry. Says he could back that up. What do you say right there? He says he guy did it.
In college, I did an archaeology field school at an estate in Missouri dating back to 1790. They made everything from lead shot, whiskey, cigars, etc., and farming.
Yeah. They made clothes. Beautiful clothes. So, slave industries were not just about picking cotton. All right? They made every fucking thing. They were skilled laborers, skilled workers, and craftsmen. They could make fantastic furniture, beautiful clothing, just stuff that would stand with or exceed anything from a northern industry. They didn't have mass production, but and I said earlier on, the society, the way it was organized, was a lot more like feudal Japan, like Tokugawa era Japan. But they had technology, high technology. The South had a fucking secret weapon. The best thing that fucking on the battlefield was a Southern weapon. It was a fucking submarine. They had, I think, 2 of them. One of them was called the Hunley, and it was a man-powered submarine.
Yeah, I saw a documentary about that.
That was like something out of science fiction. It was like something out of damn Jules Verne. It didn't have any engines. It had dudes cranking it, and it could submerge, and it could spear the side of a ship, and they'd pull back like that, and it would have a torpedo or a bomb on the end of it, and it would pull a chain on it, and the bomb would go off. That's probably how the Hunley got sunk, because it probably went off too close and it took water and it sank down to the bottom. But they brought it up with all the guys in there and coins and little candles to burn to see how much oxygen was in there, because the oxygen in there was just what you had in the cabin, and it was just a hand-powered submarine. When you looked at it, it looked real high tech from the outside, Looked like something built from the 1930s.
Slasher Fed said we should do a show about Benedict Arnold. That might also be a good show, too, because I saw a documentary about him not too long ago, and he's also, like, a fascinating character. And a lot more nuanced, I guess, than most people. Well, like most things are, I guess, like the more you look into stuff. So, are we ready to kind of get into John Wilkes Booth? Let's kind of talk about, like, I know that probably most of our crowd is Americans, but I feel like we do have a lot of listeners that aren't Americans, so I don't know how familiar they are. I mean, I'm sure everybody is familiar with like the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, but I don't know how much people know about John Wilkes Booth as a person, or what the context was like for all of that shit happening and stuff like that. So we'll get into all of that as we go along. So John Wilkes Booth. Now, like I said, he came from a large family of very, very prominent actors. Like his dad, whose name was Junius Brutus Booth, was super famous. He was like a Shakespearean actor in Europe. Now, there was kind of a big scandal because in England, John Wilkes Booth's dad, he was married, obviously, but he had a mistress, and he basically says to the wife, bye, and like he emigrated to the United States with the mistress. And then him and the mistress, I think, didn't get married until like 13 years later or something like that. So like I said, there was kind of a big scandal because he was like super famous. So they moved to the U.S. in June 1821 and bought a 150-acre farm. Now this is where near Bel Air, Maryland, and this is where John Wilkes Booth was born. Now he was actually, I believe he was the 8th or 9th of 10 kids, had a lot of kids back then. But I don't think all of them, lived till adulthood. I think maybe only 6 of them did. That happened a lot back then. So as a kid, John Wilkes Booth was actually quite popular, very athletic. He rode horses, he did fencing, he did all that kind of stuff. Now, he went to school until he was a teenager, and most of his teachers said, yeah, he's a smart kid, but kind of a slacker. Like, he doesn't really, I think one of his teachers said, not deficient in intelligence, but disinclined to take advantage of the educational opportunities offered him. So, a slacker. That's what he's saying. So, not dumb, but a slacker. He also went to, like, a Quaker school for a little while, like a boarding school. But after his dad died when he was 14, he actually ended up leaving school. Now, I always found this really interesting, but one kind of anecdote that's often told about his youth is that when he was a teenager, he apparently went to a fortune teller who read his palm and said that he was going to have a very, like, awesome but very, very short life. Like, you're going to die young and you're going to meet a bad end, she said to him. And apparently, he was real obsessed by this whole thing. His sister said he wrote that shit down and kept it in his pocket, like, all the time. And every now and then he would, like, pull it out and look at it. So I don't know if it was some kind of weird self-fulfilling prophecy or whatever, but he was really into the idea that he was going to die young, you know what I mean? So when he's 16 years old, he's getting interested in the theater. Like I said, he comes from a prominent, like, acting family. Like, his dad was very famous, and his brother Edwin Booth was also super famous, probably even more famous than his dad was. And so he starts getting into theater and stuff like that. He also gets into politics right about this time. Now, he gets involved with the Know Nothing Party. who was basically
Those are the deplorables.
They're
They're
anti-immigrant, anti-Catholic, particularly.
Yeah.
There was like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So he got.
Hold on, I want to say something. Save your spot right there, so you don't forget where you are. The Klan always comes in to focus when you talk about after the Civil War. Some people might say, well, damn, John Wilkes Booth, that might have been some kind of a Klan type operation because the Klan was around. People don't realize that the main enemy of the Klan didn't have anything to do with black people or had to do with Catholics. They fucking were terrified of Catholics, which is just something that...
There was a lot of anti-Catholics.
They were fucking terrified.
Well, like I said, the know nothing part. But I feel like it usually went together. Like racism, anti-immigration, anti-Catholic, that usually went together.
Yeah. Well, the Catholic thing is that they thought the Catholic Church was conspiring to overthrow the U.S. government. All right.
Yeah, that's what Ben Frail just said. That the pro-Masonic party.
Yeah.
They got their nickname Know Nothing because they always said they knew nothing about Freemasons infiltrating political offices.
Yeah. There may have been something to all this. All right. There may have been Catholics trying to take over the government because, like I said, Protestants were trying to, and we're doing it. So, and Masonic type people. So they had secret societies back then. They were like little miniature gang wars or cartels. Just they were more based in loyalty and information than they were selling drugs or fucking bringing people, smuggling people across borders. And then the immigration thing, they were talking about immigration from Europe because they were afraid that Catholics would use weaponized immigration to bring in more Catholics so they could fucking vote themselves into power and throw non-Catholics out. So there may have been something to all this. All right, they believed it was true. Both sides were casting dispersions like that on each other. May have been something to it because back in those days, everything was ethnically based. That's how people were. A lot of people still are like that. So, and they were like that back in Europe. So it's just, like I said, the war between North and South started way back in the honky motherland. They were fighting back before the war. They were fighting when they were still all back in Europe. They were fighting. So there's some to all these fucking what they call conspiracy theories. Yeah, there's some to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I kind of think that sometimes there's a kernel of truth to it. I don't usually think that it's as egregious as like some people think it is, but I mean, sometimes it is, obviously, but I think it's pretty rare for that to happen. But the ideas don't usually come from nowhere, unless it's something about Bigfoot being from space or some shit like that. Obviously, that's stupid.
Part of the reason why the United States is the way it is now, in terms of the way everything is decentralized, and there's still 50 states, and there's a District of Columbia, which is where they meet up. If you look at the way it was all set up, it was set up so all these warring factions could kind of have their own territory and have their own say-so over their own places, and that they could contribute in a centralized government to where that government could not oppress a state. And it was all these checks and balances to stop them from doing what they wanted to do, which is take over. Everybody wanted to take over. The thinking was very sound for the time. Keep it. Keep it so there's no way that one person could take over and tell everybody else what to do. Because they all hated each other. None of them agreed with each other. They were all from somewhere else.
Yeah, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do?
Yeah.
So that's kind of when he first started getting... So he first got involved with the Know Nothing Party a little bit. So then he starts on his acting career, which, like I said, was actually ended up being very successful. He actually made his stage debut when he was 17 years old in 1855. Now, he kind of got, heckled when he fucked up, but, it was the first time. Leave him alone. Now, he also started acting at a theater in Baltimore called the Holiday Street Theater, which was actually owned by John T. Ford, who would later go on to do the Ford's Theater, which is where Abe Lincoln was assassinated. And it's a whole thing where, Booth actually, did a bunch of shows there, so he was very familiar with that theater, which is one of the reasons why he chose that for the assassination. So basically, he actually first started out, like, it feels like he wanted to make his own way, like, without trading on his very, very famous family, because, like I said, both his dad and his brother were very famous actors. So at first, he was always billed as J.B. Wilkes, but one thing, this is funny, and I'm not sure if this means what I think it means, but they're talking about him, about Booth, as an outrageous scene stealer, and that he played his parts with heightened enthusiasm. And I was like, does that mean he was like a total ham? Because I feel like that's probably what they mean. Like, he was just a total ham. But apparently, like, audiences ate it up, though. Like, it seemed like after a couple of times, like, where it was kind of rough at first, it seemed like everybody was really into it. Like, they said he was, like, super energetic, and he's, like, rushing around and, like, doing sword fights, and, like, he was just real, like I said, he was a ham. But people loved it, I kind of feel like. This is very funny to me. So he was in Hamlet with his brother. This is one of very few times that he was actually on the stage with his brother Edwin, who, like I said, was already very famous.
I'm sorry.
He says he's in Hamlet. He was Horatio, and Edwin was in there. And when it was over, like, his brother Edwin comes out and says, "I think he's done well, don't you?" And everybody clapped. I was like, I'm not sure if I'd be, like, fucking charmed or mortified if my brother did that. Like, it's, you know, look at my little brother. He did good, and he did good. Everybody clapped for him, and I was just kind of like, okay. So at this point, he was getting, like I said, he was getting pretty famous, and there were some newspapers that called him the handsomest man in America, which... that seems a little bit like hyperbole, but I mean, he wasn't a bad looking dude. I mean, you know, but, and I never saw him alive. I didn't see him moving around or nothing like that, but, you know, maybe that helped, but he looks like a pretty good looking fella, like from his pictures. And, you know, so there's that. So basically, he starts, you know, from acting, he actually made like a shit ton of money. He got to a point where he was earning, you know, back then at $20,000 a year, which is about $600,000 a year in today's money, which is amazing, like, for stage acting. I mean, I know they didn't have TV and movies and shit like that, so you kind of had to be an actor on the stage because there wasn't a such thing as movies. But, I mean, $500,000, more than $500,000 a year, that's not bad. That is a lot of money. So he would go on national tours. He would do all this other kind of stuff. Now, so when the Civil War started in April of 1861, Booth was doing a show in Albany, New York. And he was not shy about kind of throwing his lot in with the South, saying, you know, the South seceding, saying that he thought it was heroic. Now, the fact that he said that, I'm not really sure if he said it on stage or if he just said it, like, publicly where other people heard him, but enough people heard him that they got pissed off, and basically they wanted to ban him from the stage. Is that it? What happened? Oh, I was gonna say, he dropped his glass in the sink and broke it. I was like, what the fuck? I hear all this goddamn... Jeez. Yep. All right. So, where was I? Okay. So, yeah. So, the fact that he called the South seceding heroic, people in Albany, New York were not having it, and they were like, yeah, they wanted him booted off the stage because they thought they were treasonable statements. But the critics still loved it. They didn't really, they're like, what? He's a great actor. It's like they weren't really all that worried about it. Now, at this point, too, it does seem like, even though the Civil War was going on and he was a Confederate sympathizer, he seemed to be, like, mostly appearing in border states, which, like I said, Maryland was, and also in Union states. So... I guess, and he seemed to have a hard time keeping his mouth shut about stuff, too, so it kind of got him in trouble. So basically, he's going, like, all over the U.S., like, doing his thing, like, being on stage and everything like that. He got, like, fan mail, the whole fucking deal. I think I read somewhere, too, that he was so famous that he was one of the first people that they actually recorded that women would like mob him and like try to like tear parts of his clothes off and shit like that. So there's that. So as I mentioned earlier, his friend John T. Ford, who owned another theater, opened Ford's Theater, again, where Abe Lincoln would be assassinated, in that same year. Like, so they were friends, and this was in Washington, D.C. And Booth was actually one of the first leading men to appear on the stage there. Interestingly, he was in a play called The Marble Heart, and Abe Lincoln himself came and saw the play, like from his box. Now, the story goes that during the performance that Booth was in, Booth, like, he was saying a line and, like, pointed up at Lincoln and, like, shook his fist, like, wagged his finger at him or some shit like that. And apparently, his sister-in-law, who was also in the box with him, like, turned and said, yeah, he looks like he's pointing at you, bro, kind of thing. And Abe was like, yeah, he does seem like he's looking pretty sharp at me, he said. So, like I said, he wasn't making a big secret about his hatred for Abraham Lincoln. So there was another occasion, too, where Lincoln had a son named Tad. And Tad went and saw John Wilkes Booth because, like I said, he was really, really famous. And he was, like, in all these plays, like, around town and everything. And Tad was, like, really, he was a big fan. Like, he was just like, wow, he was so great. And he wanted to, you know, it's, like, fucking... He, like, Booth actually gave the kid a rose, right? And then, like, they were like, Lincoln's invited him to the White House. And he's like, nah, he wouldn't go. I mean, I think he did take the rose from the kid, but you know what I mean? He wouldn't go to the White House, even though he was invited. So, you know. And basically, I think, like, the last acting gig that he did was actually at Ford's Theater in 1865. Now, as I said, he was making a shit ton of money as an actor, so he started investing during the early 1860s. So he did, like, some land speculation in Boston, and he also started a business developing oil wells in Pennsylvania. Now, although these oil wells were initially very successful, like they had a good yield at first, but they decided, like him, and he had two other partners as well, and the partners decided, hey, we need to, like, increase these wells' output. Let's explode some shit. Like, let's use some explosives, and it didn't work out so good. So then it just kind of, all the production was ended by their blowing up everything.
Yeah, I was walking into the bathroom and set my drink down, and it caught the edge of the sink, and it popped the bottom of the glass right off, and it all fell down into the sink.
Holy shit.
Yeah, I lost my jar. I had to go down and get another jar. Then I lost that ice. And you know how valuable a jar is here in the South.
Like, we have fuck tons of jars. Come on. And we buy things in jars all the time.
Yeah, and I got mason jars.
Yeah, I was going to say, you got all kind of jars.
Yeah.
Because you mostly drink out of those. Because I don't drink out of them because they're too big for my hands.
I'm going to start, when those tomatoes really start rocking, when tomatoes start coming in, I'm going to make tomato sauce, and I'm going to cook it in, or jar it, preserve it in jars. Like tomato sauce.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That way, you know, because I know when those things start coming in, I don't want that sauce to go bad. Remember last time when tomatoes started coming in and I couldn't eat them all?
Yeah.
We're going to see.
Okay.
We're going to see.
Well, yeah, you get some sauce out of that. Just, you know. That'd be pretty good.
Yeah, cook it in the jar.
There you go.
You cook it outside the jar and then put it in the jar, cook it again.
Yeah. Yeah, so, okay. So at this point, you know, he has all this money. He has all these other businesses and shit like that. The South isn't doing too good in the Civil War, and Lincoln got reelected. So this really, really pissed him off. So he basically withdrew from his big oil business and lost a bunch of money, like probably about $80,000, you know, give or take, maybe a little bit more than that in today's money, I mean. And so, as I said, Booth was a big fan of slavery, big fan, and was very, very opposed to the abolitionists. He hated abolitionists, and he even kind of like went in disguise to go see John Brown, the abolitionist leader. He went to see him hanged in 1859. You know, and he was like real excited about going to do that. Like I said, he had to sneak, and he had to like put on a disguise and shit like that. So when Lincoln got elected the first time, 1860, not too long after that happened, Booth had written this big long speech, which I don't know if it was he ever gave it anywhere, but he wrote it all down anyway. And he's basically like, he really did not like the Northern abolitionism. He really did not like, I mean, he was very into the South. He was very into slavery. And when the Civil War began, and 11 of the Southern states seceded from the Union, but Maryland, where Booth had been born, was, again, they held slaves, but they didn't want to join the Confederacy. It does seem like some of the population wanted to join the Confederacy, but when they did the legislature voted on it, and they pretty decisively like voted not to.
I want to say something else. In those days, being pro or anti-slavery didn't always mean didn't always mean what you think it meant. There could be a person who would be pro-slavery, but then they would say, "But slavery is immoral. We shouldn't be doing it." Then they would say why he supports it though. Like they'd be saying, some of them would say, "Slavery is an inhuman practice. It's barbaric from another era. We shouldn't be doing it, but I support it now. I support it now because the South has no industries. If slavery goes away, all of the wealth of the South will go away, and the rich people will be as poor as the poor people. And then there will be no one to help the poor people, and the South will not be able to claw its way will not have any money to claw its way out of poverty, which will mean that the North will come in with their money and take over, and we will lose our country." That's what they would say. And they would believe that. And true to that. That is true. That's what would happen. So just because somebody supported slavery didn't mean that they approved of it. All right. Now here's another angle. You had some people that would say, "I do not approve slavery. I do not approve of slavery." And he says, "But it's not that I disapprove of slavery because I think it's inhuman. I disapprove of slavery because it's keeping white people poor. These black people need to be sent back to where they came from." There was that too. So the issues are not clear cut about just if like you could have a person who was not racist supporting slavery and a person that was racist supporting the abolition of slavery. Okay, the way they talked about this in their writings is very different from what you would think of today as arguments for it. So there was a lot of the abolitionists were also anti-black. That's what I'm trying to get at. So don't color, when she's telling you these stories, you can't color it with modern thinking. These people did not think the way modern people do. They had their own motives for thinking the way that they thought.
Well, everyone always does.
Yeah.
And it's always like whenever in the context of the time.
It's in the context of the time and the context of that individual people. They had black people who owned plantations and owned black slaves. Just because they didn't think of it as a racial thing per se. They just thought of it as a money thing. But that existed.
Yeah, well, as we always point out in the show, everything's a lot more complicated.
More complicated than you think.
Than things seem on the surface. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So, to that end, like I said, because Maryland's legislature had voted against secession, they also voted not to allow federal troops to pass through the state by rail, and they wanted Lincoln to take out all the federal troops that were stationed in Maryland. So I kind of feel like Maryland wanted to kind of have it both ways, where they wanted to like stay in the Union, but they also didn't want to really get involved like with fighting the South. You know what I mean? So they're kind of, that's why they call them border states, because they were just kind of like ambivalent, I guess. They kind of wanted to play both ends, I guess. That's what he was trying to do. So the thing about it, though, is that because Maryland's legislature voted that they didn't want their rail system used to fight the South meant that DC was basically like exposed. You know what I mean? Because it's like that's kind of the only way to get there, sort of thing. So one of the things, and like I said, it wasn't just that John Wilkes Booth was like a big fan of slavery, which he was because he brought it up like many, many times, like in his writing and stuff. But another thing that Lincoln did that pissed him off was because of this whole situation, like what happened in Maryland. What ended up happening was that Lincoln suspended the writ of habeas corpus and imposed martial law in Baltimore and in other parts of the state too, and put a lot of the Maryland political leaders in prison, like at Fort McHenry, like kind of imprisoned them and things like that. So some people thought that was unconstitutional, and so that was another thing. They thought it was like overreach for like the federal government. So it wasn't just that. There was like a whole bunch of other like issues going on as well. Now, I guess like for a time, John Wilkes Booth actually went around and like he was still doing his acting thing in the North and the South. I believe he went down to even New Orleans and did some stuff too. While he was doing this stuff, apparently he smuggled quinine to the South because I guess there were embargoes and stuff like that, and you know the soldiers down there needed it because it's, you know, to fight malaria, and so he was trying to get it past the blockades and all that kind of stuff. So apparently he did that as well. At least that's what he told his sister, because she actually wrote, his sister wrote an autobiography later on, and she had like a bunch of stuff about him because she had written to him a lot and had like some letters from him and stuff. So she wrote like some stuff about that. All right. So where was I? Now, as I said, Booth was really, really pro-Confederate. His family, though, was divided. He was very outspoken. Like I said, you couldn't shut him up about it. He's, you know, like that uncle that rants at Thanksgiving that you never want to invite. He was like that, I'm imagining. Now, interestingly, his brother Edwin was an abolitionist and absolutely refused to do stage performances in the South. And like I said, Edwin was probably more famous than his brother was. And just because he disagreed with the whole thing so much. And he was just like, no, I'm not going to do it. So he basically like boycotted the South. And whenever John Wilkes Booth would start on the shit, he'd be like, and shut it. He'd be basically be like that. So Booth actually got arrested in 1863 in St. Louis while he was on a theater tour when somebody heard him say that he wished the president and the whole damn government would go to hell. So he got charged with treasonous remarks against the government, but they just gave him a fine and let him go.
Yeah.
Now, in...
talking bad about the government.
I mean, that's pretty mild by today's standards.
Yeah, that would never even happen today.
I mean, yeah, you can say that always shit. People say that online every single day. People say way worse than that online and they don't get arrested. So, you know.
Treason. Here's your fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can go.
Treasonous talking. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even think... I think they just maybe put him in a jail cell.
There was a lot of shit that happened during this war that just wouldn't fly today either. That's just one example. There was a lot of that kind of shit. And even worse. Federal government did all kinds of fucked up shit. They were panicking because they were flying apart. And they were trying to hold it together, and it didn't hold together.
Well, you know.
I mean, there was stuff happening on the Senate floor during that time, too, if I remember correctly. I don't think anybody shot anybody. That was their...
Are you sure about that?
Somebody got shot in there.
I thought they did, too.
Yeah, and I think
but I can't remember.
I don't remember if that was during the time... Because I know President Jackson shot some dudes. He shot a dude in a duel out in front of the White House. But that was before this. And it said something about his wife, if I remember correctly. Jackson was a real man, all right? That motherfucker would get drunk and piss behind the curtains in the fucking Oval Office.
That's gross.
He would fucking... Yeah, when he wanted his...
That's so gross.
He'd just invite people from out on the street, just invite them into the White House, and they'd open up big old kegs of whiskey, and they just get fucking shit drunk out on the front of the White House lawn, just regular public people.
Well, you have to think, and I was watching another documentary about this.
He was wild, man.
Well, they said that you have to think that, and one of the reasons that it was so easy for Abe Lincoln to get assassinated was because really up until the early 1900s, there wasn't much security.
You could walk right up
surrounding.
to him.
Yeah, you could basically it's like what Abraham Lincoln had like one dude. He had like one guy, but they're like, and even the White House, because I guess like the whole ideal, like the founding fathers, they were like, they didn't like the whole idea of there being all these like phalanxes of like guards and this big complicated
Didn't want to look like a European
They didn't want to
monarch.
look like a monarchy.
Yeah.
So they kind of wanted the White House to be like the people's house. They wanted people to be able, like, you had to like ask. You couldn't just like walk the fuck in. But, you know, if anybody came and petitioned the president or something like that, they would generally let you in and you could like air your grievances and stuff.
Yeah.
But, you know, after this happened, I kind of feel like they're like, maybe that's not such a good idea.
Yeah.
Maybe we shouldn't just let any old rando like wander in here. Thank you, Emily.
And the U.S. has been through several conflicts, civil conflicts. Sometimes you call it a war between states, a civil war, or a revolution. There've been, and we've had them of different sizes. The American Revolution was like a civil war, also, and some of the stuff you've seen in the past couple years looked a lot like stuff from the Revolutionary War. It got worse in the Revolutionary War. Fucking loyalists had grabbed some dude and fucking beat his ass, and then revolutionaries had run into some judge's house and grab him and his wife and take him out front and tar and feather him and burn the house down. And you know, you think all that Antifa shit and everything is fucking wild. No, it's been much worse here in the past. But it's that same thing, and it just kind of simmers for decades until something happens, when then it kind of changes the dynamic, and we'll see. But things change, you know.
Anyway, thank you, Emily. I was saying, y'all should do more controversial historical figures. Super interesting. Yeah, we should. Well, like I said, somebody already recommended that we do Benedict Arnold, which, yeah, that probably would be another one. I like doing history shows. They're fun. Well, I mean, I like all the shows that we do. True crime is fun. Paranormal is fun. History is fun.
He bet on the Crown and lost. Benedict Arnold. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, I mean, but like I said, it'd probably be an interesting show. Like I said, I saw a documentary about him not too long ago that was actually really interesting.
Wasn't a bad dude per se. He just made the wrong call.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like it. Like I said, it wasn't as cut and dried as kind of history made it seem.
Family was involved in shit too.
There was a lot of other complicating factors. So where were we? All right, so Booth gets arrested and then he gets let out after paying a fine because he made some very, very mild treasonous statements, I guess. So February of 1865, Booth actually becomes secretly engaged to the daughter of a U.S. senator. Her name was Lucy Lambert Hale. Now, she didn't really know about how much he hated Lincoln and all that other kind of stuff, but I don't know. I guess she thought he was handsome. He was handsome, like I said, and a lot of people said that at the time, and he was like super famous. And you know, I guess there was an issue of like families not approving. His mom was okay with it, but I don't imagine that maybe her family wouldn't be that into it. So they had to secretly get engaged. I don't even know if they ever got married or not, because he didn't live too much longer than this. Spoiler alert. So basically, 1864, the election is, coming. Like, Lincoln's in, and, spoiler alert, again, he's going to get reelected. But even before they knew that, the Confederacy was kind of like, it was looking like they weren't going to win, obviously. And, the whole tide is going in the North's favor. And it was looking increasingly likely that Lincoln was going to be reelected. And John Wilkes Booth was not fucking having it. I mean, he was basically, they said he just got angrier and angrier and angrier. He basically blamed Abraham Lincoln for every single goddamn thing that was wrong with the South. Now, what ended up happening was that, I guess when the Civil War had first broken out, he had promised his mom that he would not fight in the war because she had lost like several children. Like I said, I think they had 10, but I think 4 of them had died, or if I remember correctly. And so she's like, I don't want to lose anymore, so please don't sign up. And he promised that he wouldn't, but as he got angrier and angrier, he started like thinking of himself as a coward because he actually did want to fight in the war, which maybe was one of the things that led him to doing what he was doing, because he was feeling like cowardly, or he was feeling like useless, I guess, in some ways.
He didn't feel like he did his duty.
He didn't feel like he was doing what he was supposed to be doing. Like, he even wrote to her, they have a letter that he wrote to her, and he said, he called himself a coward, and he said he's begun to despise his own existence. So there's that. So now the first thing, assassination was not the first plan. The first plan was kidnapping Abraham Lincoln. That's what they were going to do first. They were going to kidnap him from his summer house, which was a few miles from the White House. They were going to smuggle him across the Potomac, and they were going to take him into Richmond, Virginia. And then they were going to exchange him for some Confederate POWs. And then he's like, well, by getting all those Confederate soldiers home and maybe like, kind of stirring up opposition to the war in the North, like they would kind of like, he thought that it would just maybe turn the tide in their favor a little bit. I kind of feel like at that point it was probably like way too late.
He's talking about those camps.
But
that's what he's talking about.
Yeah.
You guys can look it up. There were all these Confederate, or there were Union concentration camps inside the South. I believe most of them were in the South. If I remember, my memory isn't really working right now. I think they were in the South. They were fucking bad places. Fucking most of those dudes they put in there died. And they died of just damn plagues and diseases, and food was fucking bad, and they just kept them in there. And I kind of feel bad for the Union troops, because even they were like, why are we doing this? You know? The war's over. Just let the dudes go home. They thought they would go back out on the battlefield and start fighting again, which I don't think they would have. Not at that late stage of the war.
Well, apparently that's what Booth thought too, because he was going to exchange Abe Lincoln for the POWs, and he said, "Oh, they'll come back out and fight for us, and we'll turn the tide." And I'm just tripping. Like, "Yeah, that's what I'm saying." I think that as he got angry, and I think he was getting like more and more delusional, like as time went on.
Yeah, because those dudes didn't have anything to fight with at that point. You know, by the ends of those wars, the supplies weren't there. And they were fucking totally committed to win in a conventional war, to prove their honor that they were right, that type of deal. So it wasn't like a time where you could just do terrorism, you know. That wasn't around. The South would never win in a conventional war against the North. No. Not even with good generals. And we had good generals. Just couldn't do it. There wasn't enough industry there, because it would have been a long war of attrition. That's what would have happened. And a decade into it, it would have looked like World War I. People are like, what are you talking about? It would have looked like World War I, because in certain places it was already becoming trench warfare. And they would have done things that similar to making machine guns, and they had hot air balloons for observation, and artillery shells and explosive stuff. You would have had the invention of dynamite and plastic explosives coming, and under the stress of war, if you had two fully industrialized nations in North America, two of them going at each other, 10 years later, man, the technology would have been accelerated. You'd have machine guns before you knew it. Machine guns and tanks. It ended up being like World War I. Pretty quickly. But there's just no way. The South just didn't have the industrial base to do that. So, no. Look, I'm fucking Southern, all right? I understand the Southern problems with the North. The South would have never won that war. Never. Not in a conventional war. They should have fought a fucking guerrilla war. It should have been a guerrilla war, and it should have had a lot of politics and propaganda and just wearing them down and make it so it's not worth it, and then they give up and go away. That's how. But the South didn't think that way. They They were trying to outdo the South. They were trying to out north the North. They couldn't have done it. So, you know, Booth is fucking tripping.
Yeah, I kind of feel like it's really past the point of manpower, if that was even like a factor from the beginning, which I don't really think it was.
The only reason why the Confederacy says, okay, let's go ahead and do this is because they thought that France was going to supply them with the weaponry. And that fell through fucking quickly because the Union just put a blockade in the Gulf of Mexico and, you know, and around places. So you just could, and they fought France off. France fucking was going to supply, but they're not going to fight American warships in order, you know what I mean, to deliver that shit.
It's like, we don't care that much.
We don't care that much. Yeah, you know, so the South was on its own, and it wouldn't be able to supply itself, and that's why it lost, you know. So, but they should have thought that. They should have known that fucking France couldn't supply them. But if you look back at what was happening, the war between the states, the southern states, their whole thing about jumping out of the Union and joining up with each other and becoming this Confederacy was all done really at the drop of a hat. It was a very amateurish thing. A lot of it was just fucking hyperbole and fucking boisterous fucking words and something that you could write in the local newspaper. It was a fad more than anything else. It was like a fad. They lost their fucking, even their local leaders lost the ability to think rationally when it came to what this would take, you know. Oh, France is gonna fucking supply us. We'll be fine. Well, what happens if fucking the French fall through? Oh, well, you know, God will see us through, you know. We're on the side of right.
That doesn't usually work out.
Yeah, no, it didn't work that way. No. They even had a constitution they wrote up. And it's fucking ridiculous, you know. It even, like, enshrines slavery and does stuff. But most people have said that no one ever saw it, really. It was just something kind of local up in Richmond, I believe. And the other states didn't know anything about it. So the Confederacy didn't really know what the Confederacy was about. It was just, they were just making that shit up as they were going along. And it was all done very quickly.
I kind of feel like that explains a lot of human history.
Yeah.
We're just making shit up as we go along. We're not that smart.
Some of it was really cool, though. You know what I mean? Their idea of Dixie, you know? Like fucking the North had Columbia, which that's the, you know, she's kind of, Columbia is the Statue of Liberty, you know? And she was always some painting in a damn saloon somewhere. Some Greek chick with the fucking crown and sun rays. And she was a sex pot, basically. You're into drinking whiskey and, yeah, America. Well,
fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah. Well, the South broke away and they made their own version. Her name was Dixie. And she's like 16-year-old hottie, fucking, you know what I mean, with a little short tunic and her little fucking...
No Daisy Dukes. It was a little bit before those
with
times.
her little bow. She's kind of like Athena, basically.
Yeah.
Athena. Dixie is Athena, really. So all the songs about Dixie, and then the Confederate money a lot of times had Dixie on it, you know. But this is all stuff, they're even making up a mythology real quick. People are...
Well, I kind of feel like they took a lot of... Well, all the stuff about Columbia and stuff like that is mostly took from the French Revolution, right? Because they had like a personification of liberty.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's usually like a woman that's kind of like...
Yeah.
France gave us the Statue of Liberty, too. So they're like, hey, don't fuck it up.
Yeah. It's a gift.
Yeah. Greensmark said that's what Dixie was?
Yeah, Dixie.
Yeah.
Dixie's basically Athena.
Greenspark also said, I read Abe was bisexual or gay. Could have been just propaganda by his enemies, but who knows? That seems like a weird thing to have propaganda about back then, but even if it was true, it's like it doesn't really
The only one
matter.
they ever heard of that they accused of being gay was Buchanan. He was like one of the good presidents because nobody ever saw him and he never fucking caused any trouble and he did work and stayed up all late doing work. And they would make fun of him, call him an old lady, and you know, and he was up there with his wife, and because he had this other old man that lived with him in the White House. I think it was Buchanan, I believe it was. And Buchanan probably was an old queen. He got on the ballot by accident, and fucking then he was the running mate of a guy, and I think that guy died, or
I'm gonna have to look that up. I don't remember.
And I think it was Buchanan that
I
got
took American
in,
history a long time ago.
and they never really voted for him, but he was a very popular president. And
He's just like, oh shit, I'm president now.
yeah,
all right.
yeah. He was a dude they just put on a ballot to balance the ballot.
Guess
out.
I better get to work.
Balance the ballot out.
And then he went to work.
That was 1800s, and by most people, the way they read the accounts say, well, he's gay. He probably was, and they were accusing him of it. Senators were accusing him. The military called him an old lady. That old lady and his husband and her wife, or they would just do all these gender bending statements about him, and they'd laugh, But this is pre-radio, pre-television, so nobody knew anything. It was all just rumors in newspapers, and a lot of those rumors never traveled outside D.C. So evidently Americans didn't know he was just a popular president, but probably gay. I think it was Buchanan is who I'm thinking of.
Yeah, I'd have to look that up. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah.
I think I vaguely remember something about that, but
Yeah, he was
he's one you don't hear that much about, which I kind of feel like in presidential terms sometimes is probably better because
he didn't do any public speaking. He didn't have a public persona.
You didn't fuck anything up too
Nobody
bad.
knew who he was. He stayed in the White House and worked, and by all accounts, and balanced the budget. And he did everything that motherfucker was supposed to do, and did a good job. Fucking improved everything in terms of economy. And it was because he didn't care about his public persona. He just worked. That's the kind of president you want. He didn't want to be a celebrity. He didn't want anybody to see
He's
him.
like, I didn't even want to be president. I just ended up in here.
Just did it.
I just got this fucking job.
He didn't give a fuck about what the Senate said. He didn't give a shit. He just stayed up there and worked.
Yeah. So initially, like I said, Booth's plan was they were going to kidnap Lincoln. So to that end, he gets a couple of his buddies that he knows, whose names were Samuel Arnold and Michael O'Laughlin, and they were his accomplices. And they kind of would meet over at this woman's house. Her name was Maggie Branson. She lived in Baltimore, and she was also a Confederate sympathizer. So they would meet there to like put together their kidnapping plans. So in 1864, as I said, Lincoln won re-election in a landslide, and his big platform was, a constitutional amendment that would ban slavery like altogether, and he won very easily, handily. Now, because this made John Wilkes Booth so angry, he decided he's gonna like pour even more energy and even more of his money, which was substantial, into this whole kidnapping plot. So he got like a whole bunch of other people involved too. Like I said, he had help. He had like co-conspirators. You had a guy named David Harold, a guy named George Adzerat, a guy named Lewis Powell, who some people call Lewis Payne. He used different names, and a guy named John Surratt. And they also had John Surratt's mom had like a boarding house, and they would meet there for their meetings as well. Now, at this point, like I said, John Wilkes Booth and his family were not really getting along. Most of his family were abolitionists. And so it got so bad that his brother Edwin was like, I never want to see you in my house ever again. Get the fuck out of here. He basically like told him to fuck off and get lost. But, I mean, he still talked to his sister, but I kind of have a feeling that, 'cause his sister's name was Asia, by the way. I kind of got the feeling that his sister would just be like, are we talking about that again? Because he seemed like the type of dude that he would just like talk about that like endlessly. Because he was always just like, Lincoln, he sucks so much, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, oh my God, can we please talk about something else? Yeah. So it was like that kind of shit.
I wanted to say something though.
What's that?
The Dixie Chicks dropped their name because during, I think it was the second Gulf War, one of those girls said something that was pissed off their fan base. It was considered to be like not supporting the American troops, so they lost all their ticket sales. That was the end of the Dixie Chicks. So that's why they changed their name. It didn't have anything else. And the other two members of it were fucking pissed off that other girl said it, because they had a fucking meal ticket. They would have been doing USO shows forever. Okay, most of the American army is fucking Southern. the combat arms troops.
I thought they just said something about Bush. They don't think they said anything particularly about the troops.
Yeah, it was about Bush, but it was about.
I remember that, but I don't remember.
Wasn't
exactly
Bush?
What they said.
Was it Bush?
Yeah.
Was it Bush?
Yeah.
It was about Bush, but in some ways it reflected on the troops. That was the way I remembered it. But they lost their entire fan base. So they had to change their name because their fan base wouldn't see them. So it didn't have anything to do with Dixie. There's nothing wrong with the concept of Dixie. It's just a mythological symbol of the South. That's all it is.
Greenspark said, being gay was such a ridiculous no-no for so long. He had a best friend who he lived with for a long time. Same bed, but apparently that was normal then. Yeah, that's another thing, too, is I feel like it was less weird for... That's another thing. Even though, obviously, they didn't really talk about gay like they would nowadays, but it wasn't weird also for straight men to, like I said, sleep in the same bed together or be a lot more affectionate towards one another. Because I've read some letters back and forth from dudes, like back in like the 19th century and stuff, and they're very flowery. Like I said, they're very flowery. They're very affectionate. Which, like I said, if you wrote that nowadays, people would be like, "Bro," you know what I mean? They'd like kind of look at you like. But back then, it wasn't strange. So I think it's more like a cultural thing than like a fucking. So it's possible that. You know, it's context of the time. You know, it could have just been, it's like, hey, this is my best bud, you know, and we're just like hanging out. Or they could have been gay. I don't know.
Danny's asking me what kind of gun John Wilkes Booth used. If I remember correctly, it was something like a 45 or 50 caliber single shot Derringer. I think it was just a percussion cap Derringer, I believe. Some concealable. Shot him in the back of the head at close range.
It was the Derringer, yeah.
Yeah, big old fucking lead ball back in those days. It was soft lead ball, very low antimony. When it hit, it fucking that shit splattered, man, and it broke apart better than any modern hollow point. I mean, the reason why those modern hollow points have copper jackets is to keep them from deforming inside the magazine and that chambering and, you know, unloading and loading. You want it to be the bullet to hold together. But if it's just going to be a single shot, muzzle loading type situation, you want that lead to be super soft. When it hits, it just fucking splatters. People don't realize how much damage those things did. You know, those 50 caliber and 45 caliber rifles that they used, and just smoothbore or rifles too. Sounds fucked up, but I mean, if it hit a bone in an arm, it blew the arm off. It would just be hanging by shreds of skin. They were fucking devastating wounds.
Danny Rowling said you should white wig it up for this episode.
They always trying to tell me when to put down wig on. I'm not drunk enough for a wig. I'm trying to hold it together.
I don't know. You're pretty drunk.
No, I'm not. Trying to hold it together. I'm trying to hold it together for the show.
When is that ever? That's never stopped you before.
How far along are we on the show?
Probably, I'm right there.
It's
so
not time
probably
for a wig.
about halfway.
No time.
It's not time for a wig yet?
No.
Oh, okay. So I have to wait until...
I can't.
I mean, we're only an hour and 20 minutes in.
I can't get
really.
too fucked up anyway, man. I'm fucking under the influence of all this damn Minotaur juice, too.
He's under Minotaur juice.
Yeah, trying, you know.
Danny Rowling said, you broke a glass for fuck's sake. Just saying.
Man, it was just a freak.
I've broken glasses many times when I was stone cold sober.
Yeah.
So...
Just to set it down funny. Next to the fucking sink and knocked the fucking bottom of it off, and it all fucking fell into the damn sink.
Yeah.
Ghost did it.
That's the thing. It's like sometimes I do a lot of shit like that when I'm stone cold sober because I'm clumsy.
Yeah.
Not just because I'm drunk. Like, yeah, I've done dumb shit when I'm drunk too, but I do plenty of dumb shit when I'm sober because I'm super, super klutzy. So I've broken lots of things. Probably broken way more things when I was sober than when I was drunk. So yeah. So Booth actually went to Lincoln's inauguration, like when he was inaugurated the second time. And because I guess, remember, he was secretly engaged to the daughter of that senator?
Yeah.
And I guess she like, you know, made him a guest or whatever. I still don't know if she... Well, she's got to know by now, because like I said, it seems like he can never shut up about it. So, and some of the other conspirators were also in the crowd, too. Now, they didn't attempt to assassinate Lincoln at this point, but Booth said, man, we totally could have. You know what I mean? He's like, we were right there. We could have killed the president if we had wanted to. Now, when they thought that the next time they were going to try the shit was March 17th. He said he found out that Lincoln was going to be going to a play at a hospital, and he got all the team together, like on this stretch of road, like near, like on the way to the hospital where the play was going to be. And he's like, okay, we're going to kidnap him, like when he comes by, right? He's got his whole team there. But the president didn't come that way. Turned out that Lincoln at the last minute had kind of like changed his plans and said, oh, we can't go to that play. We have to go to this other reception. Ironically, the reception that they went to was at the same hotel where Booth was staying at the time. So, it almost weirdly, it seems kind of like, I don't know. It almost seems like this was like weirdly fated to happen, like all of this kind of stuff. Like, because there was all these little details like that. I know DC isn't a big town and they kind of moved in similar circles, but yeah. So April 12th, 1865, John Wilkes Booth hears that Robert E. Lee has surrendered at Appomattox. Now this, I guess it was kind of like this wasn't officially like the end of the Civil War, but they're kind of like, okay, it's all over but the shouting kind of thing. So at this point, Booth is like, well, shit. He's like, now, because the Union Army had taken Richmond and because Lee had surrendered, he's like, I don't think this kidnapping jazz is going to work anymore. So now we're going to have to go straight up assassination. So at that point, their plans changed. Now, so Booth actually, like, he sounds like a motherfucking stalker too, because it's like, not only was he at the inauguration, but he also, like, Lincoln gave a speech outside the White House, like after the surrender, right? And it was just, he hadn't written it or anything. He just came out and gave a speech and everything. And Booth came to that shit too. And something that he said in particular during that speech, like really, really made Booth mad. Lincoln said that he wanted to grant suffrage to former slaves, like, blacks, property owner, like people that he wanted to give them the vote, right? And Booth was not having that. He said, according to multiple witnesses, that is the last speech he will ever make. That's what he said. So April 14th, 1865, Booth goes to Ford's Theater to get his mail, because when he was in town in Washington, D.C., because like I said, he was an actor, so he traveled around like all over the place. But when he was in D.C., he would have his mail sent to Ford's Theater because he was there so much, because he was in so many shows and he was friends with the owner. So he goes there to get his mail on that morning. And while he's there, John Ford's, the owner's brother, says, Abe Lincoln and Mrs. Lincoln are coming to a play this evening. Our American Cousin. And supposedly, like, at first, it was also supposed to be General, like, Ulysses S. Grant and his wife were also supposed to be with them. So at that point, Booth is like, ooh, and he's like, okay, we're going to do the assassination shit, like, tonight. Now, so he goes and he rents, like, a horse, or he makes arrangements for a getaway horse, which... You didn't have a getaway car. It's 1865. You had a getaway horse, which I know that's like, it wasn't funny at the time, obviously, but like nowadays it's kind of funny. It's like a getaway horse. So, and he kind of planned out like how he was going to escape from there. So later that evening, he tells his co-conspirators, Powell, Harold, and Atzerodt, he's like, we're going to kill Abe Lincoln tonight. Actually, they weren't actually just planning to kill Lincoln. They were actually going to assassinate Lincoln. They were going to assassinate the Secretary of State, William Seward. And they were going to assassinate the Vice President, who at the time was Andrew Johnson. They were hoping to kind of like cut out all three of them. You know what I mean? At once. It was going to be like a three-pronged attack. Because obviously all the guys were going to be at three different places. So Booth was going to do Lincoln. Powell was going to do Seward. And Atzerodt was going to do Andrew Johnson, who was the VP. So they had this all planned out. So what they thought that they were going to do was that they basically wanted to basically cut the head off of the Union government and like throw everything into chaos.
It's so funny that they're doing this after the war, not during the war.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, technically, the war wasn't technically over, like officially over, but Lee had surrendered. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's over then.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, so I don't really know what he think. I just think he got super mad, and he just kept getting madder and madder, and it almost seemed like he was just trying to, I don't know, was he just like trying to talk himself into it? I kind of feel like he almost, you know, I hate to like fucking psychoanalyze people that are long dead, but he does seem to have really been fucked up by the fact that he didn't fight for the Confederacy, like in the army, like he wanted to. And he really felt like he wanted to do something, and then it just seemed like he was just getting madder and madder and madder. I don't know, he just seemed like a really unhappy person. And
He
like
probably thought that it was going to win. And when it failed, he probably said, well, it's because so many guys like me didn't actually jump in there and fight. Which he's wrong to think that. It's not why they lost. A lot of dudes jumped in there and fought. Just
yeah,
that they would
a
just
lot.
never would have had the industrial base to fuel a long war of attrition. Okay? I hear people today talking about shit happening in Ukraine, and they do not understand what the fuck they're talking about. Americans, civilians, even American military people don't really understand warfare that much. They're constantly trying to relive fucking 1990 Iraq. That's what they treat in 1991 Iraq, over shock and awe. Drop some laser guided bombs, fucking decapitate the government. Hey, it's all over. It's not how it is. Warfare is a long process of attriting the enemy and killing off its fighting forces and destroying its manufacturing capability. It takes a long time. It's almost not worth it. It's just, and really if the war itself is not genocide, then why are you fighting it? Because it'll never really be resolved. The ancients understood it a lot better. When you go to war with another country, you're basically agreeing to just wiping them out and erasing them. Because if you leave anything behind, the war will just start up again a couple decades later, a couple generations later. It just, you go in there and you destroy the damn culture, the religion, and the entire breeding population of the country. And then you take over their land and populate it with your own people and rewrite history as if that enemy never existed. That's really how ancient people did it. So there's no memory of those people. That works. Anything else is a half measure. You're just inviting attack later. An endless cycle of it. So it's a horrible process. So the best thing to do is don't do it. Okay? Don't worry about it. Learn how to fucking live with other people, you know. Learn how to work things out. Agree to disagree on certain things. Don't try to tell other people what to do. Don't tell other people how to live. It never really works out. It doesn't really matter either side. But when it came to the South, you could have never won a conventional war against the North at that period in time. No. And I'm sure Lee and all those guys knew it. They must have been trying to fight for some kind of an agreement. But the Germans tried that and they fucking lost. And Germany, as those Germans knew it, fucking never existed again. That was the same thing the Japanese were doing. The Japanese thought that if they attacked Pearl Harbor, it would scare us off. Fucking, their best generals said, no, you're fucking insane. Those Americans would come back, and next thing you know, they'll be here on our home island. And that's exactly what happened, you know. There are no half measures in this shit. It's like saying, I'm going to half kill that dude. You know what I mean? You're going to half kill that dude, and what happens when he heals back up? You know?
He's going to come beat your ass.
Right. So...
Danny Rowling said, was he a Freemason? Not that I ever heard. John Wilkes Booth.
Yeah.
I don't think so. But yeah, so the ironic thing about them thinking that they were going to take out the top three, what they thought was like the three main heads of the Hydra, I guess, is that one of the people they were, like, Seward, one of the people they were planning on killing, was actually not the next in line. You know what I mean? That actually would have been the Lafayette Foster, who was the, what do they call it, the president, the pro tempore, whatever, of the Senate. So yeah, they didn't even like talk about assassinating him. Also, they were thinking, hey, if Ulysses S. Grant is at the play too, because initially, like, he was supposed to be with Lincoln and his wife, then we can get him as well. But him and his wife actually ended up not coming for whatever reason. I guess, now I've heard that it's because Ulysses S. Grant's wife and Mary Todd Lincoln hated each other, but I don't know if that's true or not. So I don't know if, like, the wife was just like, I'm not going to go sit with that bitch. So I don't know. I'm just imagining. But I've heard that's why, but they don't even know if that's why. So the thing about it, like I said, the reason why I thought this whole thing was kind of like, it's almost like too perfect, was because Lincoln happened to come to a play at Ford's Theater that evening. Booth had performed many, many, many times at Ford's Theater, like, knew the place like the back of his hand, and nobody would think it was weird that he was, like, walking all around there. Like I said, he was very good friends with the owner. He had his mail delivered there, so he had every right to be, like, walking around, like, wherever in the place, because it's like everybody's like, hey, it's John Wilkes Booth. Everybody knew who the fuck he was. He was famous. So nobody thought it was weird that he was walking around there. So, now, earlier in the day, he actually did kind of go, because everybody knew, like, which box was Lincoln's, so he did actually kind of go up there and sort of rig it so that when he got into the box, like, he'd be able to, like, bar the door so nobody could come in after him. Some sources say that he drilled a little borehole, like, in the door so he could kind of look through there, but later on I think they found out that no, the owner had actually done that so the guard could look in and make sure there was no shenanigans, like, going on or whatever. But so I don't really know. I don't know if the owner bored that earlier or if Booth did it, but, you know, so there's that. But so that was one of the things they said that he'd, like, planned ahead of time, but I don't know if that's true. Now, so Booth goes to a bar before the assassination, I guess trying to get some Dutch courage up in there. And then he goes into the theater at 10:10 p.m. Now, while he's in the theater, he slips into Lincoln's box at around 10:14 p.m. as the play was going on. Now, interestingly, I have read that he knew the play, Our American Cousin. I don't know if he'd ever actually been in it, but it seems like he had been in it because he knew it, like, pretty intimately, like, so he knew, like, where all the beats were. So he pretty much knew that there was one line in the play in the third act that got a really big laugh. It's a comedy that got a really big laugh from the audience, and he thought that would be the best time to shoot the president because no one would really hear it all that much and there'd be, like, so much noise and shit like that. So that's what he did. He came in and he waited for that line, everybody cracked up, and then he shot. So as I said, it was a Derringer pistol, like we brought up before. It says 41 caliber.
Oh, it's 41
on
okay.
Wikipedia.
All right.
But yeah, so
it's small.
Yeah,
41.
Yeah, it was just a little.
Yeah, 41.
It was a one shot.
Yeah, it's a muzzle loading Derringer. I knew it was that. I think it was percussion cap muzzle loading Derringer. 41 was small by those days' standards. 38 was tiny. So was like 35. All that was 35 was almost like the 22 caliber of the day. Everything was big bore, but I remembered it. I remember seeing depictions of it. It's small, you know, about the size of a real small 38 special. Snub nose. I like that size. You could carry it in a pocket.
Danny Rolling said, "Who owned the Ford's Theater? A guy named John T. Ford, who was a friend of Booth's." So yeah. So Booth goes up there.
He shot the president in his friend's place. Fucked up his friend's business.
I'm sure he probably did, yeah. Or made it even more famous. I'm not sure. I mean, it could go either way. But yeah, so he basically came up and shot Lincoln in the back of the head, like, point blank range. Yeah. And then, like, everybody, you know, because the guy that was actually in the, you know, it was supposed to be Ulysses S. Grant and his wife, but they couldn't come. So it was actually Major Henry Rathbone, who was in there with his wife as well. So there was actually kind of like a scuffle after this, and Booth ended up stabbing Rathbone. I think either in the arm or in the shoulder. He survived, but like, you know, the guy was like trying to lunge at him or whatever. And yeah, so it was Rathbone's wife, I guess fiance. Her name was Clara Harris, and she was okay. Like nothing happened to her, but Rathbone got stabbed. So then Booth, very famously, jumped out the president's box onto the stage. Now, the story goes that either his spur got caught on, like, there was, like, flags, like, draped over the boxes, or it was because of him struggling with Rathbone, but he fell, like, 12 feet, and most sources say that he broke his leg or he broke his ankle when he fell onto the stage. Now, there are some sources that say that he broke his leg later, like falling off a horse or a horse falling on him or something like that. Nobody really knows, but
I don't think it had gotten far with a broken ankle or broken. He got pretty far after the shooting.
He did, yeah. So that's kind of why some people say that he did break his leg or his ankle at some point because he went to the doctor. But they don't know if it happened like during. It's not like it hugely matters, but yeah,
it did happen later.
But he did fall a long way. Now, so
how old was he again?
26.
Oh yeah, shit. No, a young guy can fall fucking from quite a height if he's in good shape and fucking be okay. As long as he PLFs when he hits the fucking ground. No, he's all right. I'm sure he made it because you're not going to get far with a broken ankle, and he made it pretty far where he was supposedly killed.
Thank you, Janet.
What does it say?
That's very nice of you. It says, "Thanks for being you."
Thank you very much, people. Thank you for the super chats.
Thank you. Yeah, Ben Frail said Ford and his brothers were arrested and held in jail for a month, but then let free as there was no evidence against them, whatever. Yeah, I don't think Ford had any knowledge of what was going on. He just owned the theater. Like I said, he knew Booth. He'd been friends with him for a long time. Booth had done a bunch of shows there. He got his mail there. He's like,
Booth knew he was coming and shit, probably.
Well, no, he knew because he went there to get his mail, and Ford's brother said, "Hey, Abe Lincoln's going to be at a play tonight." I don't know if he was saying, "Hey, he's going to be here, shoot him." No. Maybe he probably just mentioned it like just in passing. You know what I mean? Maybe. I don't know. I wasn't there. So yeah, regardless, like, so he jumps out the box like 12 feet down to the stage. Now, there are several different witness reports as to what he said. Most sources say that he raised his knife, the one that he used to stab Rathbone with, and shouted, "Sic semper tyrannis," thus always to tyrants. Which is actually also Virginia's state motto, and also attributed to Brutus at Caesar's assassination. But some people remembered that he said, "The South is avenged," or "I have done it, the South is avenged." Some people thought he said that too, but whatever it was, he was trying to make a big fucking dramatic moment about it. Now, interestingly, so as I said, because they had planned to do 3 assassinations this night, so he had given, like, his 2 conspirators, he's like, "I'm going to get Lincoln, you go this other place, you go this other place." So, how'd the rest of that work out? Not so good. Powell, who was supposed to go get Seward, now Seward was actually at home in bed because he'd been in a carriage accident, so he was, like, bedridden. And Powell somehow couldn't manage to stab a bedridden old man. Like, he stabbed him, but the dude didn't die. Like, he survived. Atzerodt, the other guy who was supposed to kill the vice president, he actually didn't even bother. He chickened out and spent the whole night in a bar getting drunk. So he never even, did anything to it. So Booth runs away from Ford's Theater. He jumps onto his getaway horse. I love that. The getaway horse. And rides into southern Maryland with one of his co-conspirators, David Harold. And basically he was going to go the back roads, where nobody was. And he knew that there was some other Confederate sympathizers along the way, if he needed help or anything like that. So he also knew that there were these kind of dense forests in the area, and there was a lot of swamps and shit like that. So he could kind of make his way into rural Virginia without being seen, hopefully. So by midnight, Booth and Harold got to Surratt's Tavern, which is about 9 miles away. And prior to the assassination, they had put a bunch of guns and equipment and shit like that there as kind of part of their earlier plot, for the kidnapping plot. But they still had all the stuff there, so they're like, okay, well, we'll avail ourselves of that. So then they kept going south. And they stopped at the home of Dr. Samuel Mudd in St. Catherine, which is about 25 miles from Washington, to see to Booth's injured leg. Dr. Mudd later said that Booth told him the injury had happened when his horse fell. So either he fell off his horse or the horse fell on him. So like I said, I don't know if it was the horse falling on him or his leg was injured, obviously. I don't know if it happened like when he fell off the shit or not. It doesn't really matter. So then they get to the house of another sympathizer, a guy named Samuel Cox. This is about 4 a.m. And basically Cox calls up his foster brother and a guy who was a Confederate agent, in charge of spy operations in the southern Maryland area. So I think that kind of connection is where people are coming up with this was a larger conspiracy. I don't think it necessarily was. I kind of think Booth was mostly just acting on his own, him and his co-conspirators. Like I said, he wasn't... The fact that he went around shooting his mouth off, to anybody that would listen about how he wanted to kill that motherfucker, really seems like he wasn't real good on keeping shit on the down low. So I don't really think it was part of a larger conspiracy, because why would you hire him? 1, he's super famous and everybody knows what he looks like. 2, he can't shut up about how much he hates Abe Lincoln and how much he wants to kill him. And I don't know. So I just don't think it was part of a larger conspiracy. But I think people point to this kind of thing saying maybe that's what it is. So at this point, as I said, most people recognized him, so it wasn't like there was any secret about who it was that had shot him. So they put out fucking the 19th century equivalent of an APB, and they basically offered, and this is a big deal, at the time, $100,000 reward back then, which is almost $2 million today. So yeah, it's a big deal. So they kind of sent a bunch of federal troops out to look through southern Maryland, because they pretty much, like I said, they got horses and shit like that. You can't get that far. So they kind of knew where he was heading, and there were other people kind of tipping him off and shit like that. So during the days following the assassination, they looked through all the woods and swamps and shit like that, looking for him. Meanwhile, obviously the nation went into paroxysms of grief about the killing of Abraham Lincoln. As I said, I think that was really something that sort of demonstrated how far gone maybe that Booth was, that he actually thought, I don't think that he thought Northerners would be excited about it, but I think that he thought that the South would see him as a hero, and he seemed very, very surprised when that wasn't what happened. When everybody basically came out calling him a monster. And the thing about it was that even people that hadn't particularly liked Abe Lincoln were horrified by what had happened and by what he had done. And I think he had a hard time grasping that reality. At least according to everybody that knew him at the time that saw his reaction, they said that he was really surprised because he thought that people would think it was cool, I guess.
Well, it's kind of like Jack Ruby. Jack Ruby shot Lee Harvey Oswald, and he thought that he would go down in history as a hero. That's not what really happened. And some people would say, well, the CIA must have put, or the mob may have put, Jack Ruby up to killing Lee Harvey Oswald. I kind of thought that, but then the more I found out about the fucking Jack Ruby, no, Jack Ruby killed Lee Harvey Oswald because he loved JFK. He just did. And he fucking wanted to kill the man that killed his president. And he thought that everybody would fucking see him as a fucking hero for killing the man that killed a good president. Same thing. Same kind of thing. This guy thought he was a Jack Ruby. Yeah, I killed the bad guy.
Yeah.
You have to understand, I mean, you see Lincoln as a hero. Not these guys. Okay.
Well, he didn't, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think that he thought that more people thought of Lincoln as a villain than they did.
Yeah, well, here's another thing that people have a hard time coming to grips with. Lincoln was not a popular president during his lifetime. He ended up becoming popular after his death and over time. But even other Republicans evidently didn't like Lincoln too much. I mean, I think he did a good job under the fucking dire circumstances that the Union was under at the time. But he evidently was not real likable on a personal level. They said he was kind of mentally kind of glitchy. He was spending a lot of his time in hiding. He may have had some mental problems. Definitely, it was under a lot of stress. They say his wife was a lunatic. I don't really know much about his wife.
She was, all I know much about her was that she was real into spiritualism. But I think that kind of happened after he died, which is not really that
The Union
weird.
flew apart under his watch. Even his own side kind of blamed him for some of this shit, which I think they wrongly blamed him. But, you know what I mean? The buck stops with the presidency, so a lot of that shit fell on him. He was kind of ended up being an American hero and a Republican hero in hindsight. After all those monuments were made and certain temperatures got cooled off and the fucking Union started to come back together, he was kind of became a symbol of Americanism. So I think Booth thought he was killing a tyrant and that he would be a hero.
He did seem to think that.
Yeah.
But like I said, so because he was in hiding, like I said, for a while, and they would bring him the newspapers, and, you know, they put Lincoln's body, like they took it on a tour, like a funeral tour, essentially, like all around the country, and they said, shit, man, like thousands and thousands and thousands of mortars came, and everybody was just freaking out. They were just kind of like really, really upset about it. And so I think he was really surprised that Lincoln was as beloved as he was, and that even Robert E. Lee and people like that came out and said, man, this is some fucked up shit that like somebody shot him, and I wasn't even on the dude's side or anything like that. But I think that Booth really seemed surprised that everybody didn't. I don't think he thought everybody was going to herald him as a hero, but I think that he thought the South would see him as a hero. Like he thought he was doing his duty, and I think he was really like shocked when that didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot with Booth, and a lot of Southerners, they were fucking very upset what happened during Sherman's march. You guys can fucking read up on that. Atlanta burned to the ground and a bunch of shit. A lot of those Union troops didn't behave too well when they got here. A lot of those Union troops really weren't all that American. A lot of them were fucking Irish straight off the fucking boat. Didn't even speak English. They're still speaking Gaelic, and they're handing them fucking rifles and sending them towards the South, and they don't even know what the fighting's about. They're just, but I don't blame them. You know what I mean? They're just soldiers going to do what he's told to do. But there were a lot of abuses on the South during that war. Southern civilians got caught in the middle, and you might have Union troops burning down somebody's fucking house and raping the women, and those people fucking were anti-slavery people. It was just war is fucking chaos. History comes in and fucking tells these stories and cleans it all up. But when you have fucking hundreds of thousands of men under arms just running around kind of doing whatever the fuck they want to do in the name of whatever ideology they think is right, all kinds of fucked up shit happens. And you got guys like Booth saying, I'm going to avenge the South. And he's got his own take on it, and he's going to fucking do what he wants to do. Everybody else is dying. He's going to fucking risk his own life. It's a kamikaze type mission. It was fucking chaos. It was fucking chaos.
Another thing that I think he didn't really think through or take into consideration was that even people in the South that hated Lincoln and didn't agree with his policies, once the Civil War was over, once Lee had surrendered and Lincoln got shot, then the Southerners were like, fuck you, bud. Now they're gonna like take even more revenge against us and fuck us up even more. So in a way it was like lose-lose for everybody. Like he didn't really think through the consequences, I feel like. And
there were also Republicans in the South. People forget that. If you watch Free State of Jones was that uprising against the Union and then the Confederacy after that. Was a Republican fucking uprising of fucking freed blacks, slaves that had been freed, and whites fighting against the Confederacy inside Jones County, Mississippi. Fucking excellent movie. But there were Republicans in the South that supported the Union and liked shit, what the hell? They like the president, so it wasn't as clear cut as you know, people want to paint it. Yeah, Mary Todd Lincoln did seances and stuff. Yeah, I'd also fucking remember hearing accounts of that she was real mentally unstable too. Can't remember exactly what it was, but she might have been kind of a bit of a lunatic.
Who, Mary Todd Lincoln?
Yeah, I remember she did some weird shit.
She probably had some problems. I mean, she had...
What was it crying fits or laughing fits or something?
Well, like Tammy pointed out, I think it was Tammy said earlier that she had, depression. She probably did, which, like I said, they probably really didn't know much about back then. And to be honest, I think we talked about her a little bit, maybe on one of our spiritualism shows, I feel like, or something. Because I do kind of feel like she had kind of a rough life where she, like, lost a kid or lost a couple kids, and that kind of, like, fucked her up. You know what I mean? Which, like I said, I understand that. That's you know.
Yeah, some have said that Lincoln may have had Morphan syndrome, but I don't believe so.
I've heard that, too, but I don't know. Like I said, it's hard to, like, diagnose shit.
Usually
like,
if somebody has Morphan
long
syndromes, they're also sterile, if I remember correctly. And I think he had kids, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how could he have had Morphan syndrome? I thought if you had Morphan syndrome, you were basically sterile.
I would have to look it up. I don't know, like, offhand.
Okay.
I don't know offhand.
I've seen photographs of him, though. He looked normal to me.
He's super tall, but a lot of people are super tall.
Right.
So, you know, it's not that weird. But yeah, so I just kind of feel like I said, he didn't really think it through. And I feel like even people that were maybe secretly glad that Lincoln got killed were not going to say it out loud because, like I said, they just got fucking fucked up in the war. They just lost. And it's like they're not going to say it out loud because they're going to get in even more trouble.
Yeah.
You know? So, I don't know. I kind of feel like it just... I don't know. And I was watching a documentary about this earlier, and they were kind of speculating on would things have been better if, you know, Lincoln, like just in general, if Lincoln had not been assassinated, you know, would things have worked out? I mean, obviously it would have worked out differently, but like how would it have been different? Like how, you know what I mean? Because what ended up happening after the Civil War was you had... you know, the South brought in all the Jim Crow laws and shit like that, and it's like, would that have happened the same way?
I've heard people, mostly they lean kind of progressive, were saying that, well, you know, if the Civil War didn't happen, the South would be a different country, would still have slavery. And no, not true. Slavery was going extinct throughout the entire world around the same time. Brazil had slavery. They had a lot of it. I think probably more than the United States did. And it faded away and became obsolete about a decade or two before it went obsolete here. And it didn't even take a war to do it. It's just that slavery is always associated with poverty. If you have a civilization that has a high poverty rate in it, there's probably going to be slavery in it. That it's going to start to use that as to fuel an economy. And then it starts fueling poverty because it just sucks all profit out of everything. It's a fucking non-functional system. As technology starts to increase, profitability starts to increase, slavery becomes obsolete and goes away. You know, the people, because it becomes a detriment to prosperity. And so, no, it does not take a civil war to get rid of slavery. The end of slavery is more associated with technological advance.
Well,
what gets rid
I
of it.
wasn't even talking so much about slavery. I was talking more about like Reconstruction and stuff like that. Like how would shit have worked out differently? And like I said, the Jim Crow era and stuff like that. Would that have worked out differently had he not been assassinated?
No, it'd have been the same.
You know?
It'd have been the same.
That's what I'm saying. I don't really know if it would have been different or not. But I was just, somebody brought it up like on a documentary I saw earlier, and I thought that was kind of like an interesting question, because I think that when Booth did it, and he even said after he did it, like after he was on the run and everything like that, he wrote in his journal that he didn't regret it. So, but like I said, I still think that he was shocked to find out that he didn't have public opinion on his side, I guess. Like, I think he thought that he was going to get more support than he got.
If you were to be able to rewind history and replay it and look at all the possible timelines, the way that shit went down was one of the worst ways it could have gone down. There were a lot of other ways where it could have gone down a lot better without that civil conflict. All right. And in any one of those situations, slavery still would have been rendered obsolete. The only difference would have been a matter of a few decades, because it was going extinct everywhere around the world around that same time. And it was because of technological advances. It's always associated with that.
Janet says, yes, because Johnson, who was the vice president, came in after, was the one who pushed the Reconstruction, not Lincoln's plan. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying, like how, like it would have played out different had he not been, like, I don't know. It probably would have been better, but I don't really know. There's too many factors.
Another thing is that we're always focusing on the political parties and the leaders involved. America's not a monarchy. All right? It's not even a dictatorship. In a way, a dictatorship might even be better than what America is. America has always been basically an oligarchy. Those elected officials are servants of the corporations and the big industries that fucking drive America forward. You know, the railroads, the banking industry, all the fucking steel mills and shit. Those are the dudes that have the real power. The presidents and the political parties do whatever those industries tell them to do. This political party fucking left-right paradigm is all artificial, all right? It's been placed there to give people the illusion of a fucking choice in any of this. If that wasn't there, all of this would be gone. It would have been gone in some kind of a revolution. So it doesn't matter who would have done what or this and that. It was really up to whatever the industries wanted, which is actually part of a lot of what the South's gripes were, is that they didn't have any say-so in D.C. because they didn't have any industries, and it was the industries that were controlling D.C. So they were right about that. It's just that they were wrong about entering into a damn conventional conflict with the fucking North. You'd lose. Now, they did get what they called a peaceful divorce, but the divorce only held for a couple months, and then fighting broke out, and then an invasion happened. You could say, oh, well, they invaded us, they're the aggressors. Yeah, it kind of does look like that, but that doesn't save you from the repercussions of this damn war. There was no way you could win that conventionally. Even with support from France, I don't think you'd be able to win it. It'd be better just to let the Union just march right in. Just let them come in, take over. And then just do a couple decades of just resistance and cat and mouse and just wear them out slowly like everybody's done to us over the fucking past fucking 70 years. And eventually the North would just let you go. You know? That's basically what we did to England. In the fucking American Revolution against England, we really didn't win any of those battles. And the ones we did, wasn't decisive to the war, really. It was just that, we didn't really get rid of the English until fucking War of 1812. And they won that one. They burned down a White House in that one. It's just that eventually the British are like, man, this is just too much of a fucking pain in the ass. Spending too much money on these fucking honkies. And they decided to just, fuck them, let them go.
Just cut their load.
Yeah. That's the only way the South could have won that one. And they had a real good shot at that. But the South was, like I said earlier, they were not a legalistic society, and they were not a practical society. They were like something out of damn feudal Japan. It was an honor-based society, and they were trying to put forth a good face, and they wanted to win this fair and square to prove to the world that they were good people. So we're going to win this like we're supposed to do it. We're going to stand here and just trade shots at each other across fields. Like that proves anything, you know. And then we capture their capital, and look, we won, just like in chess. No, those cities don't matter anyway. It's just wearing somebody out, and they didn't see war that way. They hadn't evolved to that yet. And Europeans are still like that. But that's not how you win wars. You want to know how to win wars? Ask the Asians, okay? Because they'll just wear your ass out. Like the Vietnamese wore us out.
You just have to be like a big pain in the ass, just like a big hemorrhoid.
Just pain in the ass.
Be a hemorrhoid.
Make them spend money. We could have just let the North come in and then set up all kinds of businesses to entertain their troops and just sucked all the money out of them and entertained them and sold them stuff, and then take that money to fuel guys to go in there and just fucking shoot at them every now and then just to keep them here and just wear them out. And then you send some guys up into the North to go fucking attack some people in their houses and shit, you know, like some senator. You wipe him out, and then you just say, hey, got you, bitch. You know, you just keep, let us go, bitch. And then you're out there crying, look at us, you're oppressing us. Oh my God, we're oppressed, you know, just, you racists, let us go, you know. And eventually they just go, fuck it. They get frustrated and go back home. That's how you win.
Ben says, I better get dressed. I have to be at the unemployment office in 2 hours from
Damn, go get you a job, man. Go get you a fucking job.
Yeah, good luck.
Go get you a job.
Good luck.
Yeah, I can't. I don't blame you, bro.
Yeah, I don't really want to do that. Yeah, Ben also said slavery is pre-industrial. Wage slavery, as practiced in the factories in the North, is far more efficient. Yeah, that's true.
And indentured servitude. That's even better.
Yeah, true. So, all right. So let's get back to this because I don't have too much more to go.
Okay.
So Booth is hiding, and he's kind of waiting to cross the Potomac into Virginia. And as I said, like, people were bringing him newspapers, and he's kind of getting more and more disheartened, I guess, by like how like these big like outpourings of grief like for the thing. And like I said, everybody knew who the fuck he was because he's famous. So everybody's like, that motherfucker. And he's like, oh, I thought everybody would like me because of this, but I guess not. And he also read in the paper that some of his co-conspirators got arrested. Mary Surratt, who, ran the boarding house where they would do their little meetings and stuff. Powell, that guy. And the Arnold and O'Laughlin, who were like some of his early ones. Yeah, they had already been arrested. So there was that. And like I said, he was crying in his journal about it. Like, I'm not sorry, but I thought everybody was going to, like, think this is cool, and I guess not. But, So, basically, while the funeral train was doing its big thing and, like, all the mourners were coming out to see him and everything like that, Booth and Harold, who were still together and they were still in hiding, they got a boat and a compass from another sympathizer, somebody that knew them, and they crossed the Potomac on April 21st. Unfortunately, even though they had a compass, they fucked up, and instead of going to Virginia, they went back and came back to Maryland again because they didn't know where they were going. So where they got off, like, I guess Harold kind of, he hunted in this area, so he kind of knew it there. So he's like, oh, there's a farm near here where there's, like, a Confederate sympathizer. We can go there, and, he'll give us some shit. So they go to that place, and then there's that guy had like a son-in-law named John Hughes, not that John Hughes, like the guy that directed Pretty in Pink and all that. This was Colonel John J. Hughes, and he gave him food and gave him a place to hide out until nightfall, and then they were gonna like try and row across the river again and really for real get to Virginia this time instead of just turning around and ending up back in Maryland again. And during this time, he writes in his diary, Booth writes in his diary, with every man's hand against me. He's such a drama queen. With every man's hand against me, I'm here in despair. And why? For doing what Brutus was honored for, and yet I, for striking down a greater tyrant than they ever knew, am looked upon as a common cutthroat. That's what he wrote in his diary, like after. So, like I said, he seemed like a little bit of a drama queen. So they finally get to Virginia on April 23rd. And at that point, they hook up with this other guy named Thomas Harbin. And he had actually, they kind of brought him into the kidnapping plot that never happened, like before they did that. And he took them to another Confederate guy in the area named William Bryant, who gave them horses. Now, at this point, they kind of, I guess, like, they were tipped off, like, somebody knew where they were. So they sent, like, out 26 Union soldiers from the New York Cavalry Regiment, and they went out to go after Booth in Virginia. And they also were accompanied by an intelligence officer named Lieutenant Colonel Everton Conger. Now, they go down the Potomac by boat, and then they land in Virginia at 10 p.m., and then they go across and they kind of like tracked Booth and Harold, who were still on the run, to a farm owned by Richard H. Garrett, which was about 2 miles south of Port Royal, Virginia. So Booth and Harold had actually got to this farm on April 24th, and they had been brought there by another guy named William Jett, who had been a private in the 9th Virginia Cavalry. Now, the Garretts, I guess this farm was kind of out in the middle of nowhere, because the Garretts actually didn't know that Lincoln had been assassinated. I guess the news hadn't reached them yet.
Yeah, before the internet.
It was before the internet.
Yeah.
So they didn't know. And so when they bring Booth there, they're like, hey, this is my friend James Boyd. And he was a Confederate soldier, and he was wounded in a battle, and, he's coming home. Can we just, like, come in and get some food and blah, blah, blah. Now, apparently, like, later on, I guess this family at this farm, they had an 11-year-old son at the time named Richard, and Richard later gave an account of, like, what ended up happening. So he said that Booth and Harold got there at about 3 p.m, and because, the Confederacy had kind of collapsed and they weren't getting mail and shit like that, like, they didn't know anything about the assassination. So obviously they didn't know who this was, and they didn't, he was famous, but they didn't know who he was either. So they're all having dinner together, and Booth learned about the surrender of Johnson's army, who was the last Confederate armed force of any size, which was kind of like, that's a wrap, like the fat lady sang, the Civil War is over. And so he's like, oh, well, my assassination attempt failed. Like I said, it seemed kind of late in the game to be surprised that an assassination attempt would... Like I said, Lee had already surrendered when he did that. So it's like, I just feel like it was all over but the shouting. So I don't really know why he was surprised by that. But he's just like, oh, well, I guess I failed. And basically they're like, the Garretts, so I guess somebody else at the dinner table, like, told the Garretts, oh, hey, did you hear, like, Lincoln got shot? And there's this big, huge reward for the guy that shot him. Like $100,000, which, like I said, was like $2 million back then. Like nowadays. So they said that Booth actually, like, said nothing and asked if the family, oh, well, just hypothetically, would you guys turn in the guy if you had him in your clutches? And you know what I mean? And the family are just completely clueless. Well, maybe. I mean, if we need them, we do need the money, so maybe. And I just thought that was kind of funny. And he was probably, like, sitting there shitting his pants. Because he's like, oh my god, I did it. But yeah, that's like, I don't know. That story was just, like, very, very funny to me. So at this point, so Conger, who was, like, with the 26 Union guys that are tracking Booth at this point, he finds Jett, the guy that took him to the farm, and he interrogates him, and then finds out, like, where the Garrett's farm is, and that's where Booth is. So before dawn, April 26th, all the soldiers caught up with the fugitives at this farm. And at this point, Booth and Harold were hiding in the tobacco barn. Now, the troops, like, surrounded and were like, hey, come the fuck out of there. Harold surrendered, but Booth wouldn't do it. He said, I prefer to come out and fight. Yeah, well, okay. So then, as if in retaliation, the soldiers just were like, fuck that, and they set the barn on fire to get the guy to come out. So Booth is, like, still inside the barn, and apparently there was a sergeant named Boston Corbett who, like, kind of went in there and just basically shot him in the neck. He didn't kill him right away, but yeah, shot him in the neck. Now he said that the motherfucker raised a pistol to shoot at me, so I shot him. Although Conger, his superior, said that that actually Corbett shot him, and that he should get in trouble because we were supposed to bring him back alive, and he was kind of mad. So I don't really know, like, how it went either way, because there's obviously two people said two different things. So they dragged Booth out because they shot him in the neck and he was paralyzed. So they dragged him outside and put him on the porch, and then he lived for about another 3 hours, but he died after that, age 26 years old. Now, apparently his last words, well, not exactly his last words, but one of the last things he said was, "Tell my mother I died for my country." He wanted them to say that. And they said also that right before he died, he held his hands up in front of his face and said, "Useless, useless." His hands were useless. I don't know if he was just delusional or if he really meant that. Like, my hands are useless because I shot the dude and it didn't do any good, or I guess. I don't know.
No, he's just dying.
I don't know what it was.
It probably just means it's all for nothing.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah.
That it's like I did it and it was all for nothing.
Yeah.
Now, after he died, his brother Edwin, who, like I said, had said, "Get the fuck out of my house and never come back," because they really did not agree about politics, Edwin wrote to Asia, who I don't think agreed with his political views, but at least was still talking to him. Edwin wrote a letter to her and said, "Think no more of him as your brother. He's dead to us now, as he soon must be to all the world. But imagine the boy you loved to be in that better part of his spirit in another world." Asia, the sister, she also had a letter that Booth had given her, and he said, "Open this after I'm dead." And in the letter, he said, "I know how foolish I shall be deemed for undertaking such a step as this, where on one side I have many friends and everything to make me happy. To give up all seems insane." I agree. "But God is my judge. I love justice more than I do a country that disowns it, more than fame or wealth." So that's what he said in the letter. So I guess, like I said, he didn't regret it. He was a true believer. So basically, I mean, like I said, he even wrote it. They seized like a bunch of his letters that he had written, like, to his family afterward. And basically, he says, "I've ever held the South was right." That was another thing he said in one of his letters. "And looking upon African slavery from the same standpoint held by the noble framers of our Constitution, I for one have ever considered it one of the greatest blessings, both for themselves and us, that God has ever bestowed upon a favored nation."
Yeah, so he's saying slavery was good for white people and black people.
That's what he said.
What he said, yeah.
That's what he said. That's what I said. He was a big fan.
Yeah.
He was a big fan. So yeah. So they wrapped him up in a blanket and tied him to a farm wagon. And, like, drove him back to the fucking, yeah. So they drove him back, and like I said, now this is kind of where there was some controversy, because some people said, oh, like, nobody that was there, like, that identified him really knew him, and it's like, he lived and shit like that, which I'll get into in a second. But when they took his body, they said they took it to the USS Montauk, and then they took it to the Washington Navy Yard for, like, IDing, and they were going to do an autopsy and shit. Now, when the body was there, when they were doing the IDs, 10 people came that knew him and said, yeah, that's him. You know what I mean? So it wasn't like just random ass people. Like, people did come that knew him. And they said that they knew it was him because he had, like, a tattoo on his left hand with his initials on it, I guess in case you forgot what they were. And he had, like, a scar on the back of his neck they said was very distinctive, and they recognized that as well. So they buried him they put him kind of like in a storage room at a penitentiary, and then they later moved to a warehouse, and then they were gonna, like, before they buried it, they actually had it identified again, like, in the family plot. So they did, like I said, have family members and friends and stuff like that did actually, like, come and identify him. So it wasn't like just a bunch of strangers or anything. Now, 8 other people that were implicated in the assassination conspiracy were actually tried by a military tribunal and found guilty in June of 1865. Mary Surratt, Lewis Powell, David Harold, and George Atzerodt were all hanged in July of 1865. Samuel Mudd, the doctor, Samuel Arnold, and Michael O'Laughlin got life imprisonment. There was in Florida, in Fort Jefferson. There was another guy named Edmund Spangler. He got 6 years in prison. O'Laughlin died from yellow fever in 1867, like in prison, and the others were eventually pardoned in 1869 by the incoming president, Andrew Johnson, who had been the vice president under Abe Lincoln. So, let's see, where was I? Okay, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, after Lincoln was gone, and peace started to come in, they kind of did everything they could to try to leave the war in the past. They started releasing a lot of people and pardoning people because they knew that they couldn't really fucking continue doing what they were doing. Things had to go back to normal. I mean, you couldn't wipe out and fucking imprison fucking 30% of the population. You know, come on.
We don't have the space for that. Come on.
Yeah. Well, they didn't have the power either.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying. Well, yeah, I'm trying to be.
Best thing to do is they would start to try to smooth it all over, at least on the surface. Other shit that they were doing, like sucking all the wealth out of the fucking South and sending wealthy Northern families into the South to take over. They did shit like that. Carpetbagging, carpetbaggers. So they had a new campaign to try to make the South more Northern. Didn't work, though. Didn't work.
Yeah.
Every one of those Northern families you fucking sent here, within a generation later, they were just fucking as Southern as you can fucking, just Southern as hell. Sorry.
So, yeah, so the whole thing about Booth, like, it wasn't really his body and it was a lookalike and stuff like that, all of that comes from 1907. There was a book called Escape and Suicide of John Wilkes Booth. And the whole thing in that book was that actually, like, somebody that just looked like Booth was killed at the farm, and then Booth got away. So the whole story was that Booth actually took up the name John St. Helen and had a house near Glen Rose, Texas, and then later moved to Granbury, Texas. Now, when he got sick and was on his deathbed, he made a deathbed confession, one of those famous deathbed confessions, that, hey, I'm John Wilkes Booth. What ended up happening was that I don't know. It was just kind of like this whole story that he just fucking got away and ended up fucking committing suicide. So, like, somebody went away and committed suicide, like, his name was David George and all this other kind of crap. So there was all this kind of, like, big conspiracy theory. Like I said, that was where I first got the idea. And I was like, oh, that might be kind of interesting. But the more I looked into it, I was just kind of like, oh, okay, probably not.
They asked me if John Wilkes Booth's gun could penetrate a modern bulletproof vest. No. It would just splatter. Lead was real soft. It was heavy, but it would just splatter. Low velocity.
Yeah, I think somebody brought that up later on because that was a
okay.
long time ago.
Oh, okay.
Somebody asked that. Yeah.
Okay, that's okay.
There was also the same guy that wrote the book that said that John Wilkes Booth had survived and then, got away and committed suicide in 1903 or whatever. He also exhibited this guy's mummified body on the carnival circuit as the man who shot Abraham Lincoln. So I kind of feel like there might have been some monetary gain there, maybe. So because this rumor had started going around, the Maryland Historical Society puts out this account in 1913 by the mayor of Baltimore. And he actually had seen Booth's remains, like when they brought the casket to the Weaver Funeral Home. And the mayor had actually known Booth quite well when he was a little bit younger. And he's basically like, yeah, the body I saw was absolutely Booth's. And as I said, like, other people had identified the body too. Like his mom, his sister, his brother, his dentist, and some other friends of his that he'd known in Baltimore. So, like I said, it was absolutely him. I just feel like the guy that wrote that book in 1907 had a corpse laying around that he wanted to put on the carnival circuit, and he's like, hey, I'm going to latch it onto that, so he wrote a book to go along with it. It's like, hey, it's the man that shot Lincoln. Come and see him at the carnival. 5 cents. You know what I mean? But, yeah, so that's kind of thing. And honestly, like, I kind of feel like that rumor keeps going around, like, every few years, because they said that like in the early 1907, 1913, somewhere around there, be on the carnival circuit, here's the man who shot Lincoln, like the mummy or whatever. But they said then it happened again in 1920, and it started going like an urban legend type of thing. And so he was like, woohoo, I'm gonna start doing showing the body again, and there was that kind of stuff too. So I kind of feel like maybe that's all that was. It was just like a carny trick, maybe. I don't know. But I did look into it, and it really didn't seem like there was much to it, because a lot of people did actually identify him that actually knew him, including his family members. So there was that, and also he had a pretty distinctive tattoo and a scar and everything like that. So I don't think he survived, because like I said, who the fuck else was? It was just him and that one other guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they knew that's where he was. They just looked through the barn. It's like, oh, he's in the barn, and they fucking shot him.
Yeah.
They dragged him out. They dragged his ass out. I just kind of feel like that it happened the way all the people said it happened.
Well, some people wanted it to be more complicated than that.
Well, I kind of feel like that's the problem. That's like sometimes shit just happened the way people said it happened. It's not mysterious. It's not scary. It's not anything like that. It's like it's probably just real mundane.
Maybe we ought to do one on Jesse James one of these days, because he had a bunch of Confederate connections.
Yeah, we haven't done one about Jesse James, have we? Didn't we do?
No, that's a true crime that you could do right there. And many have said that Jesse James and his gang were robbing those trains and doing all that stuff as basically a ex-Confederate special operation to get the money together to fight a resistance campaign to get the North out of the South again. There may be something to it. He had the military background and evidently the connections. And there is a bunch of missing money, or missing stolen stuff. What happened to it? Was he stashing it and stockpiling it somewhere? Those are some of the conspiracy theories around it. Maybe. If not, he was just raiding fucking trains because he was like, these are enemy trains, I'm going to take this shit, Might have been that. Dude who's just not gonna... He was eventually just shot in the back while he was hanging a picture on a wall. But evidently he thought he was out of the game at that point. So maybe for a while. I don't know. It's hard to tell. Be interesting to look into it.
Yeah, I kind of feel like, Ben Frail said Jesse James, Ned Kelly, same folk belief in survival. Now, we did do a show about Ned Kelly not too long ago. I could have sworn we did one about Jesse James, but I guess we didn't.
I don't think so, no.
We've done a couple Old West shows, though.
Yeah.
I feel like.
Yeah.
I just can't remember what they were. I know we did like a Ghosts of the Old West show. That was fun. But...
He was an accomplished train robber. Jesse James was good at that.
I just can't remember like what the other ones were. I know we've done a couple of Old West shows, but I can't remember what they were at the moment. So there's that. But yeah, so people gave me some ideas, so I'll put those in the next poll. Which, if you're a patron, which you should be, then I usually put the polls up Friday mornings, or at least Friday mornings Eastern Standard Time. And there's 5 different topics you can pick from. I try to have a good combo in there of like a paranormal topic, true crime topic, historical topic, shit like that. So people can like pick. And you can also like choose what movie we do a movie retrospective on. I also give 5 choices for that as well. And you also get to find out like what shows are coming up the next week.
Yeah, Ben in there is coming up with some good shit. Yeah, you also forgot about Elvis folk belief and survival. I could go on about Elvis and the South. When I grew up as a kid, above people's mantles were fucking pictures of Jesus and Elvis right next to each other. Mm-hmm. And when you looked at them, all the pictures of Jesus did look like Elvis. And fucking Elvis was a messianic figure in Mississippi. Definitely. Stories about him, he could make it rain. Crazy shit, man. And then when Orion appeared, people thought that it was Elvis fucking returned from the grave. Mm-hmm. And that was a dude from Mississippi who could sound just like Elvis. He put the mask on, and it did look like Elvis when he had that fucking mask on. Just listen to Orion's music.
Well, they talked about that some. I think we got kind of into it because we watched a documentary about Orion.
Yeah.
And... it kind of goes a little bit into the whole mythologizing about Elvis and about how, like you said, he was like a messianic figure.
I'm old enough to know when all that shit was happening when I was a kid, of how Southerners from the 70s and the 80s, the very early 80s, how they saw Elvis, like my parents' generation. And then like the Orion thing, you know what I mean? I can fucking, yeah. I didn't hear about Orion until later, but I could see how I saw the films of Southerners reacting to Orion, and I was looking at the album covers that had the funerary motif, like he had come back from and it's hinting that it's Elvis back from the fucking grave. Yeah. Southerners wanted to believe that. Certain Southerners in Mississippi wanted to believe that. That's why he should have never taken that mask off. Good.
Yeah, that was a mistake.
Yeah, and they told him that too. Don't take that mask off.
Yeah.
Because not just religion, but anything fucking supernatural, and the belief in the supernatural, the paranormal, is very strong in the South. People don't understand. It's very strong. As strong as, say, Mexico. Especially that generation, you know. It's a shame that it subsided some, because that was part of the mythos, part of the soul of the South, was to believe in these things. And there's truth to these things, because fucking I've had out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, seen poltergeist phenomenon. Think I was in a house that was bad. I think you'd call it a haunted house, but never really could prove it. But the South is just awash in that, including blues, you know, and Southern black population very much into the paranormal, you know. It goes all the way back to with the Haitian influences and stuff, you know, and down in New Orleans and everything, and selling your soul to the devil at the crossroads and all that kind of shit. Fucking.
You know, we did talk about that.
Yeah,
that's Robert
right.
Johnson. Yeah.
Yeah.
We talked about that on our Mysteries of Rock and Roll show,
Right.
which was we did that a long time ago, but that was fun. We
Yeah.
should probably do like a part 2 of that. I feel
Right.
like.
So it's just very strong in the South.
Actually, maybe I should write that down.
I mean, eventually even Iron Maiden is fucking singing songs about fucking the Mississippi Delta swamp fucking demons and shit, and the fucking evil spirits in the South. So, you know, it took a while for even Iron Maiden to get around it, back when they started to suck, because Metallica kicked the living shit out of them. But, you know, but yeah, they got it too. And that's why Interview with the Vampire fucking was so good, you know. Because that's kind of true to the southern to the Southern mentality.
I kind of feel like anything, because like what Ben Frell was saying about Jesse James and Ned Kelly and stuff like that, I kind of feel like any figure that is bigger than life in any way, whether they're a celebrity or whether, you know, they're a outlaw or whatever, it's almost kind of like they can't die. I mean, I don't even know if people want to say necessarily they can't die, but they can't just die in like a mundane way.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I fell down the stairs in my condo and broke their neck or some like mundane. It has to be like some big epic thing. So like if they just die in some stupid ass way, then everybody has to say, well, that obviously can't be right. You know what I mean? So I kind of feel like maybe that's one of the things that might have fueled the whole Elvis didn't die type thing, was because people didn't like the way that he died, because it didn't befit his legend. I mean, he just died in a very like sad, mundane kind of way, like a lot of people die. And I think that people had a hard time dealing with that because, like I said, he was so famous and he was so larger than life, and nobody wanted to feel like somebody like that could just like, you know, die on the can, like, you know, of fucking just having all these drug problems and stuff like that. Nobody wanted to hear that. Everybody wanted it to be like mythical.
Ben says he's got that Orion book. He's never read it though. He must be. Are you Southern, Ben? What are you doing with a fucking book about Orion?
That was a fascinating guy. I mean, it's a sad story.
Yeah.
It's a sad story, but I mean, there's a documentary about him. I think it's just called Orion, right? Isn't it called Orion something?
Yeah.
I think it had like a subtitle.
Dude sounded just like Elvis, man, just as good. and then retired.
It's a good
and
documentary.
was running a pawn shop, and then somebody by just random came in and fucking shot him and robbed his pawn shop.
Yeah.
In the middle of Mississippi.
That's what I mean. It's a sad, sad story.
Yeah.
And the thing that's sad about it, too, is that, I mean, he got famous, kinda, but, I mean...
He said he's in Australia.
Really?
Yeah. And he's talking in Italy, Scotland, Ireland, rural France, famous highwaymen and robbers are
always thought to be immortal. Yeah. That's what I'm saying, because they get to a point where they're like bigger than life, and they can't just be taken out in some mundane ass way, because that's not how it works.
That's a trip. He's Australian. He knows his shit. He even knows who Orion was.
Well, I told you this before. I don't know about nowadays, but I know that particularly in the late 70s and early 80s, there was a lot of, because I was real into like Nick Cave and stuff like that. And I know that, so a lot of like Nick Australian, South, they were all into like mythologizing the South and blues and everything like that. Like if you hear his early stuff or like his stuff with the birthday party and stuff like that, very, very blues influence.
If you don't live here, you hear all this fucking horror stories about the South and everything, and fucking the Civil War, fucking slavery and shit. The thing is, though, is that if you were to actually go through just a survey just over the years, the South has the highest life satisfaction fucking rates of anywhere in the United States. Mississippi has the lowest incomes. It's 33%. I think it's 31 or 33% black, which is it's the highest black population. The lowest crime rate. The lowest. What is it? The lowest crime rate, lowest incomes, lowest education, the highest amount of guns, but the highest satisfaction, life satisfaction scores of all of all the other states. And the South is kind of like that, and the other states are kind of comparable. The other southern states are kind of comparable. And what it is that the South is fun. The South has a fun culture. It's not very materialistic. It's just it's fun to live in the South, and they don't micromanage you that much. Money goes a long way. You don't make much of it, but it goes a long way when things are running normally. You can party a lot here. You'll find people who are like you no matter where you are in the South. Like I was living out in the middle of nowhere. I'd go to New Orleans fucking almost every weekend. Fucking have all kinds of fun. Hanging out in goth clubs and stuff. Or go down to past Christiana, Mississippi or Biloxi. Fucking, the casinos, like something out of Star Wars, man. The South is like something out of Star Wars. It's just a lot of fun, You can live out in the middle of nowhere if you want to, or you can live in a town, or you can live in a city, or you can live in a fucking place filled with fucking casinos, or you can go into the South, or you can go into fucking South Florida, and that's like being in the Bahamas or something. It's just the fun place. Got a lot to choose from.
Yeah, kind of.
And they don't climb up your ass. It's nothing like Boston. Boston is micromanaging motherfuckers, man. Make you pay for everything. It's just a lot more fun than California. California's all about traffic and high population density. Michigan was kind of fun, but Michigan's very bland. All right, it's good for certain things, but it's not good for other things. Most states are kind of like that, including the southern states. It's good for some things, but not good for other things. But I was still glad to be back in the South. South is fun.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah. All right. So I guess nobody else is talking about anything. Anything else you would like to talk about?
You want to run and want to shut it down?
I mean, I'm done with my notes.
Look,
if you want to get and talk about something else, you can.
No, that's it. We're gonna have to. Are you hungry?
Yeah, a little bit.
I can make another pizza if you want to. I got more dough, or I can make burgers. But if not, we got more hauntings to watch.
Yeah, we didn't realize this. We bought season 8 on Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
And then we went to watch another one last night, and I was like, oh, we watched them already because it was only 6 episodes.
6 episodes, yeah.
So then we go to buy season 9, and it's like it looks like it's there, but they don't have it like available. So you can't buy it
or rent it.
So I don't know why. It must be some rights issue. So they don't have 9 or 10. But we bought 11, which I don't know how many episodes it is, but it was only $4.99 for the whole season.
Yeah, and the first episode was about a case here in Florida.
And it was a little...
It was fucking wild.
One thing, okay.
Ghost from India came and got her. Yeah.
We should probably do a show about it one of these days.
I want to do a show about it one of these days.
Because, yeah, it was in Stuart, Florida.
Yeah.
And, okay, it demonstrates one of the things... I know, what you know, we're done talking about John Wilkes Booth now, but we wanted to get back into, like, the haunting. Or a haunting. Because I realized one of the things that's different from the old ones to the new ones. One of the things that really stands out to me, I'm sure there's more than one thing, but one of the things that stands out the most to me is that I feel like the later seasons, they didn't shoot as much footage because they reuse footage like a lot. What they'll do is like they'll have this shit happen, you know, blah, 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 there's a shadow going behind the person or whatever. Then they go to commercial break, but obviously we bought it, so, you know, we don't have a commercial break. And then it comes back, and then they show you like 2 or 3 minutes of the same shit over again.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, we just saw this. And it's like, I feel like they don't do that as much on the old ones. So I kind of feel like the old ones, maybe they took it more seriously, or maybe they had more money and they shot more footage. This, like the newer ones, it seems like they shot a lot less footage because they keep reusing it.
Stretch it out.
To stretch it out. And like, it seems like the stories are a lot less substantive. And so they keep repeating the same things over and over.
Well, we'll see. We only saw the first episode of this season. Well, you know what I mean. I can judge it better when I see a few more of the seasons. But it's a few more of the episodes out of the season. That last season was kind of like that, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. And actually...
but that was like years before this one. So we'll see how they change.
Yeah, and like I said, the season 8, like, had some of that, but it wasn't too bad. But then, like, when we got season 11, and we just saw the first episode, and it seemed like they did it a lot in that one, because it really didn't seem like they had much substance to that story. So they kept, like, showing the same thing over and over.
That last season, though, I would say the quality isn't substantially worse than the other ones. It's just a little bit less.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
And I don't think the music is quite as good.
Yeah. No, so far in this one, the music didn't seem as good. In the first episode of this season, the music seems to be canned music. I don't think it's...
And I don't know if it was just because this particular episode was based around a ghost that supposedly, like, followed them home from India on the plane. I was imagining all kind of scenarios. Like, I was like, where did the ghost hide in the plane? Like, when she was flying back from? Because the lady was she worked for an airline, and she flew back and forth to New Delhi all the time, and apparently she had brought an Indian ghost lady with her. So there was that. American Military 100 said, Jenny, will you ever do a show about Sophie Lancaster, the girl murdered for being goth? Yeah, I actually
that was in England, wasn't it?
Yeah, I actually have been wanting.
Terrible. I remember when that happened.
Yeah, that was like that's a sad
stupid shit. They beat up that fucking girl. She was cute, man, real cute. And some goth dude, who was just a normal looking guy. They I don't understand that shit. I don't know the exact fucking play-by-play. I'd have to listen to the witness testimony. But no, that shit. Were they beat to death because of how they looked? Or did a fight ensue over how they looked and beat her to death for what she said? I don't know. You know what I mean? Not to say that it makes it any better. It just makes it a little bit more understandable. How can you just see some hot goth chick and go, I don't like that, and just beat her to death?
Oh, it happens, I'm sure. It happens.
It doesn't make any sense.
And well, the weird thing about it, I don't know. I don't really understand. Like, look, even if I'm walking down the street and I see somebody that I think looks weird or fucked up, It never occurs to me like, hey, I'm gonna go beat up that
Yeah,
person, or hey, I'm gonna go like fuck with that person.
Yeah.
Like, leave them alone. Who fucking
Yeah.
cares? Doesn't have anything to do with you.
Worst I'm gonna do is scoff at that person, like, oh, look at that shit. You know, that's the worst I'm gonna do.
Well, that's what
Yeah.
I mean. It's like, and why would you even do that? Like I said, it's like you don't know them, they don't know you. It's like nothing to do with you. So
I've
it's
seen
like,
so
why
many-
the fuck do you even
We've
care?
been in so many
why
clubs
do you care?
and seen so many freakazoids. I don't even laugh at the way people are dressed. I will laugh at the way they're not dressed. That motherfucker got no style.
Yeah, I'm more willing to
Look
like
at it.
I'm more inclined to like
Yeah.
laugh at you if you just like, you know,
Yeah.
come in the club with like your cargo
Yeah.
shorts and your
Yeah.
Crocs on.
Or, dude,
Then I'll laugh at
Dude,
you.
you're wearing plaid pants and a fucking striped shirt, dude. No, you doing? You know, I can understand laughing at that.
But I'm not gonna like punch a dude out or anything
No.
like that.
No.
And I'm not gonna be like super obvious about it either.
No.
I might like laugh at him behind my hand and
No.
stuff. But it's just like I said, it's none of my business. Wear what you want. I don't give a crap. People probably laugh at shit I wear all the time. I don't care. You know? Shit, man. It's like we see people come in there like dressed like furries and shit like that. Everybody's like, whatever. I don't care.
Yeah, the clubs we go to are other people. To us, it's normal. Okay. Other people would just see it as a circus. And in some ways, I see it as entertainment too. Everybody's there to entertain one another. But it's just all, I just take it all for granted. That some motherfucker's going to show up as a furry. That somebody else is going to be just gender bending the shit out of this. And then you're going to have some fucking gender non-binary this. And then you got fucking gothic fucking mega queen with her fucking titties and all kinds of shit. And then you're going to have fucking fetish boy. And then you're going to have... And these are all just archetypes that we understand.
Well, and the thing is, like,
Yeah.
and then they just walk in, everybody just kind of like,
man,
what's that?
Man, yeah, you're not
No
you're
one
not
cares.
impressing anybody.
No one
Well,
cares.
you can impress somebody, but it's not. You're not going to shock anybody, and nobody. You know, you're not really making it even. You're not really even making a statement. No, people are kind of indifferent. Now, you come in decked out in a fantastic outfit, and you just fucking gorgeous with a fucking booty like Kerosene Kitty or something, and all she does is post pictures of her booty and just dances with her booty. Everybody fucking knows, you know what I mean, what that's about. So you'll get attention that way, but that's not your clothes, it's what's in that clothes. There's a lot of those, you know. You got some people that are just gifted, you know what I mean, and that'll get you attention in the clothes, but nothing else really will.
Like I said,
And-
it would take a lot. Like,
Yeah.
I don't really know sometimes, because I kind of feel like, and we brought this up before, especially like when you go to goth clubs and you have like some kind of like normal people that come in there.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll try to like get attention by coming in and being like, woo,
That's not gonna get you
and like
attention.
acting. I'm like, mostly everyone will just be annoyed at you.
Yeah, they're like, oh shit.
They'll just be like, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
How long before these motherfuckers get kicked
Yeah.
out?
Right.
It's like 5, 4.
What ends
3.
up impressing people in the clubs that we go to ends up being basically a mixture of good taste and genetics. I think that's a universal with all scenes.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody
Yeah.
comes in looking really
They
good,
look
looking
fucking
like they
good.
got their shit all
Yeah.
tight and like
they're
locked
wearing-
down and whatnot.
and they're wearing something that suits them, and it's got mojo behind it. It doesn't have. It could be anything. It could be just like a punk rock outfit that fucking is fan, or a goth outfit, or it could be a '70s outfit. Okay, they've
Yeah,
seen
something
before.
that looks
It
distinctive,
just
and you're working it.
wow, we've had fucking. There's Shauna's come in '70s retro outfits with fucking bell bottoms and everything, and looked great, But you can't just fucking wear, I don't want to talk about it.
I don't want to talk about it.
That's not how, you can't just wear some bullshit and get fucking attention, It's a
not
mixture.
It's
a mixture
There's a lot
of
of other things
So
behind
a bunch of other factors.
it does.
And half of that shit, genetics, how you look, that's and that is a constant throughout all scenes.
DJ Maniac said, "This doesn't seem to work for me anymore. I dress to the nines. I'm hot as fuck." but I think these girls get a daddy vibe from me these days.
Go on HRT, bro.
I mean, well, the thing you have to admit that like once you get past a certain age, people aren't gonna, no matter how good you look, people aren't gonna look at you the same as they're gonna look at some like fucking 25-year-old.
The average woman becomes invisible at 40. The average man becomes invisible at 50. All right. So you can't be the average man or woman. That's the secret. You can't be average. And you're going to have to fucking look towards fitness and technology and sports medicine.
But even that can only do so much because I mean, you're still going to look older than, and obviously if somebody that's a lot younger comes in, everyone's going to pay attention to that.
The thing is though, and this will tell you, they'll tell any fucking really good cosmetic surgeon will tell you this, or a plastic surgeon. The secret to fucking being attractive when you're older is not to look younger. It's just to be more attractive. So a lot of the stuff that they do to people and things that you can do to yourself is to make you look more attractive, not to make you look younger. There's a fucking big... You're never going to make an older person look younger. Do you understand what I'm getting at?
It's just going to look weird if you
It's going to look weird. You can't make an older person look younger. You can only make an older person look better. And that's how you do it. So, fitness has a lot to do with it. Getting weight off has a lot to do with it. There are women out there in their fucking 70s that look great. I saw them at the damn biker bar with boyfriends who were in their 30s. Remember I told you about that?
Yeah.
Biker chick? She was thin. She had big implants. She had a little bit of facial work done here or there. There's probably a little bit of hormonal assistance there. She didn't look young. She looked hot, though. She looked hot. And dude was all about it. Her little 30-something-year-old boyfriend. He just, And she looked great on the back of a fucking motorcycle. And the way she was dressed looked fucking great. Little tight jeans and a fucking little vest and her boobs and her fucking... And she was fun. Fun. Her little white hair and little braids and stuff, and... She wasn't trying to look young. She was just in good shape and took care of herself and spent money on herself. And she was a model. That's what she was. She was a model. But she had been a model when she was young. So her self-esteem was looking good, and she just invested money in herself. That's how she made money and felt good about herself. And she was, I think she was 71. I think. But from what I saw, she could do porn. And they do have porn stars that age. There's a few of them. And, some of them look good. And didn't I show you that one? She looked like a damn, her whole thing, she's like a fetish. Looked like a damn wicked witch with big old titties, big old skinny chick. I'll show her to you.
Yeah,
I showed her on the show.
Yeah, I think you did.
There's some out there. She looked better than that. 2 or 3 times better than that. So she could go to the club and score guys. So, so here's the deal. We're all going to die. We're all going to die. The secret is to die strong and to look as good as you can. If you ask me, that's what I want to do. And my role model is not Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's that Chinese guy that I've shown on there. He's 73 years old, and he looks about like I do at 73. He's a little bit better looking than me in terms of fitness and hardness, a little bit more mass. And I'm on some Minotaur sauce right now. I'll pick up about 10 pounds over the next month, if maybe 5 to 10. And if I can hold everything together. And I'm gonna and then once I get that, that's it. I'm not gonna get any bigger. I'm just gonna maintain that and fucking enhance things that I have and just try to ride out the next 25 years, 20 years, Because we're all gonna die eventually of something. I just want to die in good health and die strong. You know what I'm talking about? And be having fun the whole time.
Ben says, just remember that 50% of people are below average.
Yes. Yeah.
That makes you feel a little better, actually.
Jenny's way above average. No, Jenny, you're way above average.
Well, no, I mean, I didn't really mean it like that. I was just saying.
No.
Zach says, I need to get my ass to a goth club before I decease.
Zach, yeah.
It's Zach with a K, not Zach with a. I don't
Is it
think
different Zach?
I don't
Okay.
think Gay Zach has been here this evening.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I hate
Gay
to call
Zach.
him Gay Zach and Straight Zach.
We got straight Zach to gay Zach.
Zach with a K and
Yeah.
Zach with a H.
Well, you got to find your local one. And
I mean, some of
go
them
in
are
there and
better
just-
than others, but
Yeah, some are better than others. Go there, go mind your own business, and just fucking keep your eye out and just watch what's happening. Get to know people. Start at the bottom and work your way up. Don't try to make friends. Just try to make peace. Just go in there and just see what the hell's going on first, you know.
Which reminds me, we got Memento Mori on Friday night.
Okay.
So we got to go after the sidetracks.
You're right.
So we'll be going out after the sidetracks. There were 2 this month because it was a holiday.
Yeah.
And whenever there's a Sunday night holiday, they always have one on. Or whenever there's a Monday holiday, they always have a Sunday night, like, supplemental. But they usually do it on Friday nights, which is what they're doing on this Friday. So, so we'll be going out on Friday night. I think that's all that I wanted to address. Okay, so we were on almost 3 hours, so that's
it's a long show.
something. And I got through my notes, and I got like a bunch of good ideas for new show topics.
All right.
So I'll put those in the poll for Friday morning. So, yeah, thanks everybody for dropping by and hanging out with us. Thanks for your super chats. We're going to take the day off tomorrow, but we will be back on Friday night for the Sidetrack show, have a drink and talk with you guys, and then, like I said, we'll probably be going out afterward. So hope you guys enjoyed this little historical show that we did this evening.
Yeah.
And we will see you guys again Friday night. What?
Oh, yeah. DJ Maniac, he named you Sally D'Angelo. That's right, Sally D'Angelo. That's what it was.
Yeah.
She's the oldest one I know of that's in there.
I remember,
She's
but
wild,
I
yeah.
don't really remember what she looks like.
She's
but
amusing. She's
Yeah.
wild. Yeah.
All right, so we'll see you guys on Friday night. Good night.
Yeah.